Okay, welcome to this evening's advisory board meeting. Bring the meeting to order. Our agenda for tonight is to have the presentation regarding the B1 district zoning. Thanks for coming and providing that. After that, we're going to set our department presentation schedule, which largely involves the budgets. And then we will approve minutes at the end. So, did I get that right, Susan?
You got it.
Outstanding. So having said that, let's introduce our guest and go for the presentation. Now, we all got this electronically, I believe, those on the advisory board.
There are a couple of, I made a couple of copies, but figuring people could share if they wanted to. Yeah.
And just to set people's expectations, about how long those take?
I'm hoping to do about a 10-minute presentation.
Okay, and then maybe some Q&A after.
Some questions and answers after.
Great, and if you can introduce yourself.
Sure. Thank you.
And so we are recording, yes? That's right. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Josh Fiala, Principal Planner at the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, MAPC, regional planning agency for the town of Norfolk and in the greater Boston area. Happy to be with you this evening. Thank you for taking time out of the agenda to discuss the B1 Town Center zoning. I have a brief presentation that I've prepared some remarks with, so it's up here on the screen. So I'll introduce and frame the conversation, and I'm happy to have a brief discussion, as you mentioned. So I just want to introduce this study, if you're not familiar with it, talk about the recommendations that came out of the study that we worked with, the B1 community prepare, and then talk about some next steps and some discussions from there. So the town's B1 working committee has been working with MAPC, myself particularly, for the past year plus, defining new zoning language for the town center. Mostly to remove impediments to mixed-use development in the town center. We've been working with this B1 working committee that you see up on the screen, and that work began in earnest about January of last year. So we worked through the 2019 calendar year and have had prepared recommendations for the special town meeting in November, and then those were indefinitely postponed, and we're still talking through in sessions like this to keep that effort going, and hopefully through this presentation you can understand the importance of why. So mixed-use development in the town center has been desired and pursued by the town of Norfolk for a decade or more. The town's master plan from 2007 expressed a specific vision for the town center, which you see up on the screen. And that vision articulated the town center as a pedestrian-oriented, walkable, traditional New England community town center with mixed-use development and a place for all age groups to gather and come to as a destination. The townwide economic development study in 2018 highlighted the importance of town center for townwide economic development priorities. And then this zoning effort and zoning recommendations build off of those previous planning efforts and are consistent with them. Through our process, we had a community survey which reached 540 residents. About 79% expressed that they were either neutral or dissatisfied with the current condition of the town center. So not a resounding vote of support for what the town center is today, and some hope and optimism for what the town center can become. And the zoning recommendations are hopefully headed towards that larger vision which people are expecting and hoping for. Some great progress has been made in preparation for mixed-use development. Roadway improvements with the new roundabouts and excess road capacity in the town center, new streetscape, sidewalks, street lights, underground utilities, a partial wastewater treatment plant, not to mention the great asset of the commuter rail station, which you see in the photographs there as well. But these assets and activities have not resulted in the desired development on some of those empty parcels in the town center. One of the most recently completed mixed-use developments, 18 Union Street, is probably the best example of the type of development that is desired, and that would be supported by the mixed-use zoning. Our analysis has shown that the size of the property that 18 Union Street was, the zoning characteristics work for about that, but as soon as you get to a property which is about 40,000 square feet or larger, the zoning characteristics don't work as well, and they actually don't scale up to a larger property. So that's one of the fundamental issues there. So you could, if parcels were all this size in town center, you could potentially keep going with the way zoning has and maybe expect a few more mixed-use development buildings of this type to come along. But the issue is that the remaining parcels that are empty in the town center are much larger than this parcel. So other recent development activity in town center has been through Chapter 40B housing. development, so that's housing only. That includes Boyd's Crossing, proposals at 146 Main Street, 25 Rockwood Road. These projects are not mixed-use projects. They're residential only, and one of the major goals that we've been hearing again and again for town center is that there'd be commercial components included along with the residential development. So what we're talking about really are some limited development opportunities for mixed use in the town center. We've done a parcel analysis of all the currently zoned B1 parcels, and those in green, which you see on the screen today, really are the focus. So it's not the entirety of town center that we're talking about. It's a very focused set of parcels that would be really the beneficiaries of these zoning changes and recommendations. But those green vacant parcels have a major impact on the perception of the district and its vitality. So you can see a street view of that corner there. So this is, not the image of a vibrant and vital town center that you expect to see or that people are hoping to see. And these are the parcels that are targeted by the changes. So the recommended zoning changes, in order to respond to community desire for improvement, capitalize on the investments already made in town center, and respond to market demand that's present in town center, the current zoning language must be modified. And those modifications are focused on increasing the likelihood of viable market-based development. So there's some language in the zoning as it is today that we see as major impediments to market-based redevelopment. And those have to do with building scale and density, building height, parking, and uses. So we've recommended changes to that language to facilitate more dense and compact development in the town center while also promoting the type of character in town center that people are expecting and hoping for. So that's a balance we've struck with the language. So my intention for the presentation this evening is not to go into details on the recommendations, but to just frame out the narrative of how we've gotten there. So the recommendations include removing residential bedroom limitations, increasing the allowed density of a project, increasing the allowed height of a project, and that's what you're seeing diagrammed here, from 3 stories to 3.5 stories, decreasing the required parking, and improving requirements for the combination of commercial and residential uses. So all of those things, the way the language currently is, we think are the reason why you're not seeing development on those larger parcels, and why you're seeing 40B projects, which can skirt the current zoning regulations and bring forward residential-only projects are happening. So these changes, the recommendations we put forward, we believe would help create a pathway for viable projects on some of those parcels. We also prepared, as a part of our work, design guidelines for the district, which have been reviewed by the Design Review Board and have been recommended to be used to guide development. So those are set up in place. It's an extra protection for the town, and it's a manual for developers to look at to actually understand the characteristics which are desired in town center. And it talks very specifically about the types of design, the design features, the way the buildings and sites should look in town center. We believe the recommended modifications to the zoning and the design guidelines combined are both a way to invite and encourage that investment, but also protect the community's interest, as we've heard them expressed throughout this process. It's difficult. I think one of the things that we always hear in processes like this, as we're talking with communities about zoning changes or development in certain locations, is that change is difficult. There's concern for what any change to regulations might bring, and the concerns for unintended consequences. It's difficult to look into the future, but one of the ways that makes that a little easier is to look at other communities within the region that are a little in a different place in terms of mixed-use development in a town center. So I brought forward one example which I think is very relevant, and they've done some great work recently to understand the impacts of mixed-use development in their own town. I always caveat that it's no matter what community I bring to whatever the community is, or whatever comparison I bring, any one of you could probably tell me 10 reasons why they're not the right community to bring forward. But with that said, I'll just go ahead and say that I'm going to mention a few things about the town of Dedham, Oh my God. So it might not be, you know, overall town-wide, it might not be the perfect comparison, but what's been happening in Denham Square is very interesting. And they have, let me just describe for you what's happened there, and you can see some parallels very quickly. And so they're a little bit on the other end of the spectrum of allowing community development and mixed-use development in their town center, and have actually recently evaluated the impacts of that. So let me share some of the results from that recent study. So the town of Denham has a mixed-use development bylaw, section 7.4, if you're interested in looking at it. They require a special permit from the planning board in the central business district, which is Denham Square. The zoning states that all dwelling units shall be located above the ground floor, similar to what we're talking about in Norfolk Center. Zoning does not define the number of bedrooms or any bedroom limitations that they have to avoid potential housing discrimination complaints under Fair Housing Act. It does not define a maximum residential density. Residential density is something we've been talking about a lot about within these recommendations. And it does not define a maximum number of residential units. They also have no minimum affordable housing requirement, which we are talking about an affordable housing requirement here. They don't prescribe a percentage of commercial space. So within the zoning, there's no requirement of X percent of square feet of commercial relative to residential. The only way to regulate that is that residential has to be above the ground floor. That's what they say. So that's how some of their zoning characteristics relate. Zoning requires at least one parking space per dwelling unit, which is one of the recommendations we made here. And additional parking for non-residential units, for non-residential uses. So other commercial uses have their own parking requirements that get added into the parking. So Dedham approved, town meeting in Dedham approved these zoning recommendations for mixed use in 2004. So since 2004, they've had 10 mixed use development projects proposed and constructed in the town. So they, as communities do with change, the residents there felt like they were getting a little ahead of themselves. So they imposed recently a mixed-use moratorium. So they wanted to stop the flow of mixed use in the community. Not necessarily Denham Square, but the community at large. So it was a town-wide moratorium on mixed-use development. During that time, they wanted to do a study to see how the impacts of mixed-use development, those 10 projects in Denham Square being part of that, were impacting the town. So this is what the study is very relevant to what we're all thinking about here. So the study was authored by the Barrett Planning Group, Judy Barrett, who's a pretty well-known planner in the area, and it's called the Mixed Use Development Impact Study. So we're privy to some of the initial conclusions from that report, but I don't think the report's fully available on the town's website yet, but it should be soon. So you can look at that when it is. So the projects, those 10 projects have combined to produce 258 total residential units in the town center in Denham Square. Nearly all of those, even without any bedroom limitations in the zoning, nearly all of those are one-bedroom units by choice of the developers. And there are a few two-bedroom units. The density of those projects ranges from 15 units per acre to up to 107 units per acre, depending on the size of those parcels and the size of the projects. On average, commercial tenants occupy only about 24% of the ground floor. So they need to, it's commercial uses on the ground floor, but they're not occupying all of those floors. Parking is occupying some of the floors. I'm not sure what else is occurring on some of those floors. But it's not 100% commercial all the time. Based on interviews with 18 businesses in Denham Square, that study reports that 83% of the clientele are local Denham residents. 25% of those businesses report that the downtown housing has measurably increased their business in the town center. The combined assessed value of those properties is $33.9 million, and together they pay $590,000 in real estate taxes annually to the town. Town departments have reported no adverse impacts on their operations from the housing in these units, including on the schools. So families with school-age children do not live in any of the mixed-use units currently, including the few two-bedroom units. As I mentioned, most of them are one-bedroom units. And the estimated cost-revenue ratio is less than 0.35. So in other words, for every dollar of tax revenue generated by these projects, the town pays about 35 cents in services to support those buildings. So overall, what they're finding in this study is that the mixed-use development has actually been very beneficial for the town and for the town center from a number of perspectives. The projects have requested no waivers regarding the number of parking spaces required, so that's that one space per unit, as I mentioned. And they had, as a part of that study, McMahon Associates, who's a transportation planning consultant, and they found that there's been no adverse impact on mobility, traffic, or parking throughout Denham Square. They do have a municipal parking lot and parking supply in the square, which is to be noted, but similar to like you have some of the commuter rail parking supply as well to help.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that last couple sentences?
The parking.
The parking
Impact.
What are you?
Yes, the McMahon Associates was the parking
Right.
and transportation consultant, and they found the mixed-use projects have had little to no impact on the quote mobility, traffic, or parking throughout Denham.
Okay.
That's what it said in the executive summary I was able to review. I'm hoping that there's more information behind that statement in the full report.
And what was your comment about the local commuter parking?
They have a municipal parking lot, I'm not sure the number of spaces, but it's a surface parking lot right in Denham Square that is able to support Denham business uses.
Which RT parking lots don't,
Right.
basically.
Which I think is an opportunity.
That's why I asked the question, because I didn't,
Yeah.
there is a
And
disconnect there.
I think on that point, on that disconnect, right now, there's not a parking supply issue in Norfolk Town Center. If,
I take the train every day, there is a parking supply issue in Norfolk Town Center.
with the commuter rail park,
Yes.
I think there's room potentially for conversations with MBTA as Norfolk Center gets to be a bit more dynamic place, more parking may be needed. I think there's discussions with MBTA that have occurred in other cities and towns regarding non-commuter rail peak time use of parking lots for other supportive uses and or expansion of the parking spaces that can support both commuter rail and other uses. So
Mhm.
there's ability and longer term conversation there with the MBTA and the way they're looking at real estate around commuter rail lots. So I think that I found the similarities there, just from my vantage point, to be really interesting, and I hope that they were as well, to share that, just to be able to use Dedham as a comparison to maybe think about some of those future implications that we're thinking through in present time here. So the benefits of mixed-use development, just to include supporting the town's tax base, and including commercial tax in that mixed-use development, proactively planning for growth in a location in the town that can support it, that is walkable, that does have commuter rail access, providing choices to residents, additional housing choices that, for residents maybe looking to stay in the community, who are looking to downsize, for residents who have young professional children who want to stay in the community, who maybe can't afford something else. These are all diversifying the housing stock in such a way that some of those residents might be able to find a new option. And then looking for ways to support businesses in the town center and provide support much in the way that Denham Square businesses have seen that support. And also building up and providing that critical mass of uses in a district which becomes more of a destination over time that people really do seek out as Norfolk residents, but also surrounding communities as well. So as you know, these recommendations were postponed from the November special town meeting through Richard McCarthy's efforts and a little bit of our help as well. We've been able to seek and find a new grant supporting continued efforts from MAPC to help the town working through and continuing with these zoning recommendations. That's through a mass housing grant. And our goal and intention is over the next year or so to continue to build confidence in the recommendations, continue to hear feedback, continue to have conversations such as this one here This is hopefully not the first time that or I mean the last time, it's the first time, but not the last time that we'll be able to continue this conversation with your particular committee. And then setting them up either in another special town meeting in the fall or in next year, May of 2021's town meeting, full town meeting, to have people be confident in these zoning recommendations, which we still believe are relevant and important to the town. So the study from the previous efforts should be available soon on the town website, and that is available for review. It has a lot of details that go into the recommendations and the reasons beyond which I've described at a high level here tonight. And myself and Rich are available for comments or requests for groups that want to meet with us or hear from us. We'd be happy to do that as we talk through these recommendations over the next year or so. So with that, I'm happy to take some comments or questions.
You
Thank
say
you.
the study, are you referring to this report, the final report, that's gonna be up there too?
This report, yes.
This report, good, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Has Dedham met their 40B requirements? Is that why they didn't have,
They have not,
I didn't
no.
think they had, okay.
No, the percentage is around 6 or 7%, I want to say, now, for 40.
No, they're above 10%.
Oh, no, oh, sorry, Dedham.
Yeah.
I thought you said Norfolk. No.
Yeah,
No,
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 Dedham,
we know
Dedham,
that one.
Dedham's over 10.
Yeah, Dedham has, yes.
Dedham is.
I'd like to take a couple of advisory board questions, then I'll open it up to the audience here. I would like to start with Susan. Susan, I know you've had an ongoing interest and involvement with this. Any comments or things you want to add before we get into the question section?
Yes. So Josh, we haven't actually had a chance to meet yet. I'm on the B1 committee, but
Yes.
we've missed each other at the last few meetings. I know you prefaced it with saying no one would ever be happy with the comparable town that you picked, but Dedham is probably one of the worst comparable towns that you could have picked. No, not you personally, just in general.
Yeah.
It's, couldn't be further from Norfolk. It's a hub of Boston. It has, you get on 128 and you're in Boston in 20 minutes. That's just not the case for Norfolk. Norfolk is designed originally for families. That wasn't the case for Dedham and isn't still the case for Dedham. With that said, there are a couple of towns who have mixed-use buildings. One of the concerns that I know the advisory board had originally was decreasing the zoning for parking. And although you say that, Dedham per se doesn't have an issue with parking, we're not comparable to Dedham. So we are gonna have an issue with parking, especially if we lower the amount of parking that they have to put in a location like that. And I believe, it was just brought to my attention that the Mansfield mixed-use property is actually having trouble putting businesses in their first floor commercial simply because of parking. They don't have the parking for customers to come there, so businesses don't want to put the time and effort into something if they can't have the customers be able to park and use their locations. So I do think, I believe that Mansfield, some of the developers there just asked for a variance or a waiver from the town so that they could change it from actual commercial property, with independent businesses being in there to, I don't know, laundromats and community centers for their apartments, which I know was a concern for the advisory board when this was first done, because that was a loophole that was glaring to us the first time around. And since I think you can point to that town as having that exact problem that we raised last spring when this came up, or last fall when this came up, I think that goes to show that decreasing the parking and not having loopholes for the types of businesses that can go in is probably some things that need to be buttoned up before you bring it back to the town for voting. Because I know we've made this point, and I know we made this point in the B1, you only get one bite at the apple. So if you don't do it right the first time and it doesn't pass, which in our opinion it wouldn't have passed the way it was written, if it doesn't pass, you don't get another chance. So if you want to actually make zoning changes that work for the town and that are going to pass through different types of people voting for them, then you have to make sure that you're addressing all concerns to the best of your ability. And for me, those are some pretty big glaring concerns that I have. And I know other people have them as well. So I think that as a member of the B1, I know that's something we're going to work on, but as my role on advisory, I would like to see those changes made prior to bringing that back otherwise, I know I specifically would have to vote it down. I can't say what anyone else would do, but that would be my stance. I do think that 107, I know you're not saying that Dedham and Norfolk are the same, but just in general, 107 units per acre, which is one of the examples that you gave, a town like Norfolk can't support that. And just, there was no impact to the traffic patterns in Dedham because they have 4-lane highways. We have a single rotary with not a single, stoplight in our town. We can't support for example, the one by Walgreens is 5 acres. Even if you put a cap on it at 25, you're still looking at 100 units just in that 1 acre, just per 1 acre over there. The one where Borks is gonna be 60 apartment units. 60, another 100, another 150, another 200. Our town center can't support that. So there has to be a way to marry the two. I haven't heard anyone who has an issue with the parcel on the corner, the new one on the corner.
The dance studio?
Thank you, yes, where the dance studio is. But I believe there's 16, is that right? 16 units? So,
No, there's 8.
Eight units. 8 units. I don't think anyone has a problem with 8 units. To my knowledge, that has never been the issue that someone's, saying, don't build anything. I think they're just saying, build it within reason. Build it with the right parking, build it with the right height, build it with the right number of units, making sure you take into consideration the drain on any town resources that we would have, and taking into consideration the fact that almost every resident has said if they would be okay with apartments or townhomes in that area if they got businesses to go along with them. But some of the developers have a genuine self-interest in not having commercial property in the bottom. They don't say that going in, but that is absolutely their end game, is to make it things for their residents so they can charge more for their units and not actually put commercial property in the bottom. And I don't think that's what any of the residents in Norfolk wanted. So I think that those loopholes need to be fixed. That's my opinion.
On that point, can I ask just a quick question? You said that 24% of the commercial units were actually rented in Dedham?
I think the 24% was to the amount of that ground floor area that is actually commercial space.
Right, so 75% of what was intended to be commercial space is something else.
And I
Either
think
empty, vacant, or parking.
I think in often cases, it's parking to the rear of what is the commercial frontage of that building.
So, I mean, to Susan's point, I think that actually illustrates the point Susan's making, is they built all 16 of these mixed-use buildings in Dedham, which, according to the presentation, has been a resounding success, but 25% of it is actual commercial. Right, so if that's the success story, I think we should take that as a point of information, if that's what we should expect as well. So,
Are there uses other than parking that it could be? In other words, business, open, empty, building, which nobody wants. Parking, are there other than parking, are there other things?
Well, I think some of the ground floor would be occupied by the residential lobbies and elevators or stairs up to the upper units. I haven't done an analysis of each of the ground floors to know what they are, but my guess is that it's commercial space, parking, and some vertical circulation up to the upper floors.
Yeah, this is a theme that's come up a couple times at our meetings. It would be helpful going forward. As we understand these examples, I think people have repeatedly cited the concern of people wanting to put in really thick, huge residential areas and, I'll throw a bone, I'll call it commercials, I'll dress something up on the ground floor. I'm exaggerating, but probably not that much. So that's been an ongoing concern. Susan has been our person who's done the most outreach from that. Although lots of folks can ask questions, Susan's a great person to coordinate with on a lot of this. I'll take one other advisory board question, then we'll go to the public here. Yes?
I have 2 questions, so I will pick one.
No, you can go.
Oh, okay.
Two's fine.
My first question is, I just want to make a clear connection. I'm asking, the connection between 40B and this would allow us to determine how 40B might look in our town versus letting other
No.
things happen, or no?
No, 40B overrides everything.
No, I
No matter what
understand,
we
it,
adopt.
but this could help us get to 10% to
No.
stop projects that
Well,
are
there
gonna
are,
push
I
through.
would say there's a few considerations for 40B here. Right now, the way the zoning is, I think 40B is really the only opportunity for a viable project to come forward, so that's where you're seeing more 40Bs. The hope through the zoning recommendations that we would create another viable opportunity.
Okay.
Whether or not a developer would still choose to do 40B or not is an open question.
Okay.
The other way we're trying to impact the 40B equation is through the affordable housing requirement. So we have increased that through our recommendations to 15% so that it's less of a chasing your tail sort of situation in terms of the production of housing units. So you would be producing housing units at a rate which would be improving your ability to reduce the 10% threshold that you're trying to achieve.
Okay. And then can you talk a little bit about the people that are moving into these units in towns? Because like one thing Kristen brought up last time is like if people are moving into these units who don't have cars because they're planning on commuting and they're just couples, then that doesn't feel like it would impact the town as much as people with cars and sending kids to schools. Do you like have a sense of who's?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to generalize it because it's a lot of units. I didn't have access to it, but in the report that I've mentioned in Dedham, they had access generously from the developer of the tenant records, and their reflection on that information was that it was mostly like teachers, firefighters, young professional types, or retirees from within the community that are self-selecting to live there because of their preference to walk around to shops or businesses or because of where their work is located. So I think that there is a little bit of, related to the parking concerns, there is a little bit of self-selection that does occur, where if you only have a parking space available to you, there's families or households that see that as desirable, have only one car, or don't want to have two cars anymore, that make that choice, and they have the commuter rail available, and they can walk to some other shops. So I think that's the patterns that we're seeing generally, in the Dedham example, then across the region as well.
Audience questions? Yes?
Can I have to follow on that?
Oh, go ahead.
If you don't mind, Chris. In Dedham, and it's not gonna be the same out here, but are the residential generally rental units, or are there condos mixed in, or what's the?
No, the way the report described it is that it's almost 100% rental in Dedham.
Okay.
And the unit sizes ranged from 400 square feet to 1,500 square feet, just to give you a feel.
Question, yes?
I just want to go back to parking. My understanding is that minimum requirement is a minimum requirement. So if a developer felt that he wanted more parking based on whatever statistics are out there or his needs are, he could still do more. It's just that that's the minimum. It's not a maximum requirement of parking.
That is correct.
So I just want to clarify that point.
Has there ever been an instant where a developer has put in more parking?
Well, I
In
would,
the
I would
history of-
suggest if the market, right, if people aren't renting because there's not enough parking, they would.
He would, sure.
Wouldn't it be too late at that point?
Yeah.
Sure, I would think so.
No,
Perhaps a
because he
second
would know
audience?
that before he's developing the project.
A second audience question?
Sorry.
Yes, in the front row, please.
I just have two questions about the report that's gonna be available. Are the survey results included in that? Because the survey is only about 5% of the town population, so in terms of a return rate, it's well below what you would expect. So do you have what people said, and is that all mapped out in the report?
We don't have it as a part of the report here. This is more of a summary report with the recommendations and the process. But I can give Rich all of the report answers, and we can put that up as sort of a report appendix if you're curious to look at the specific responses.
Yeah, that would be great. And then can you just define, you used a sort of a market-based redevelopment. Define what market-based redevelopment is, just for edification.
Yeah. So these are what we're talking about is privately owned property where private owners will have to make investments in their property based upon the real estate market, and they'll have to make those investments presumptively to make a profit or return on those investments. So that's what a market-based development is. So this isn't town funded, this isn't public housing, this is all dealing within the market-based context, the real estate market-based context.
And then my last question is, how many 40,000 or more lots are there? I saw the map, but Those
Let's
maps
go
are
back to that,
not
because
easy
I
to.
have a similar question.
Oh, good. And can you just like for the rest of us say, this is where we're sitting, right here, just.
Yeah, sorry, this map I didn't put, there are street names in the report, I promise. But we are
I
here.
think this is something we addressed in the B1 working group, was that we wanted more detail in the map before it got put up on the website, correct? Didn't we address
It is
that
in the
last time?
report, yeah, there is, correct.
So
That's
we're,
town hall, okay.
yeah, we're here in town hall. The parcels which are the largest in scale are these green ones here, and then the one on the corner here. I believe this one, the small carve out here, which is under the same ownership, I believe, is around that 40,000 square foot threshold, as is, that one's a little bit bigger. So the green parcels are really what we're talking about in terms of our analysis of what the parcels we think would be most, we call it susceptible to change. So that, I mean, they're greenfield properties. There's not really any impediments. There's no development on them. They're ready to go.
So the top triangle, upper left triangle of green,
The green.
yeah,
Yes.
that's the one that's across from Boardman and Main, near Ivy Music,
Okay.
That
Right.
building is,
I think so.
okay. And then the long oblong green one is the one across the street from Walgreens, in between Main Street
No,
and Walgreens?
that one
Yeah,
is.
that one.
Yes?
Yes.
And then the big one to the left is in between the commuter parking and Walgreens?
Yes.
Yes.
Is everybody, is that right?
That's right.
And how many property owners are there for those lots? Like how many actual lots are there?
Three,
Three,
Is it
three
over
lots?
yes.
So, and
No,
ma-
there's 3 owners. There are 5 lots.
okay, and so this may be in your recommendation, I haven't obviously seen the report yet, but would you ever write a recommendation that just speaks to these very large lots? Like you're saying now that we have a situation where our zoning sort of speaks to these smaller lots, and they look great, everybody's happy with it. So do your recommendations say, hey, let's just address these larger vulnerable lots, but what's the impact on the smaller lots?
Yeah, I think you could, I mean, that's something that we can consider in this continued conversation, would be to do a tiering of large lot versus small lot and how those recommendations work out. I don't think that's a bad idea in terms of the concerns that are being raised and the sort of the unintended consequence or unpredictability of the scale of change. From my perspective, seeing how these places change, I don't think that the issue is one of sort of rampant change. So I mean, it's fine to do that to help people with the concerns, but I don't think the risk here is that you're opening a floodgate of redevelopment. I do think that the challenge is to get something to happen on these the green parcels that we've highlighted here. And even with the zoning recommendations we're making, there still might not be any development that happens on those parcels.
There is a proposed development on one of those parcels right now within our current zoning, isn't there? I thought I've seen that on.
Yes, there is.
Yeah, okay, so it's already happening for one of those.
The sort of sage green, teal, bluish looking ones,
No,
Correct?
top left green, the
triangle.
yes,
the triangle.
Yeah, the one
Next to
across
Ivy
from
Music.
Boardman, that's
Uh-huh.
currently
Ivy that.
being proposed.
presently
Yes.
proposed.
Right, but it
for-
hasn't gone through zoning yet, correct?
No,
I think it's at
In
the
the
very
process
beginning.
right now.
Okay, cause the sort of teal blue colored ones, the horseshoe one is the one that's going
That's wrong.
Rockwood Road behind the train tracks,
Yep.
that's already under construction.
There.
Well, not.
Correct,
Not
well,
yet,
they're
but-
they're
They're
clearing
permitted.
it,
Yeah.
they're
They're
clearing it, it's been approved. And then that one is the horseshoe is the 60 units that's going where Bork's used to be, and it's about 3/4 of the way through zoning, but it's a 40B, so it's going to go in. It's just a matter of zoning board tweaking the way it's gonna look, but it's going to go because it's a 40B.
And
They-
none of
they
them have
can't stop it.
commercial.
And none of those have commercial. The 60 unit one is just straight apartments. They have 8, somebody correct me if my math is wrong, they have 8 3-bedroom units out of 60, and then the rest are 2 and 1 bedroom. And they said they weren't gonna have families, except they're putting in a playground, so they're gonna have families. I mean, that's just what it is. And then the one behind that, the horseshoe, is the one, it's the same developer as Boyd's Crossing, so it's gonna look a lot like that. It's gonna be like a half moonish looking thing with like a center in the middle, so when you drive, I should be looking at the backs of them. And that one is fully permitted and approved, it just hasn't started yet, and the other one is almost. The 60 unit, for those who haven't been to a planning meeting, sorry, I don't mean to be sound preachy or anything, I'm just letting you know. The 60 unit one is apartments. So all 60 count towards our 40B number. Because once it becomes a rental unit versus a condo or house, standalone house, the whole entire number, even though only 25% of them are going to be affordable, all 60 units count towards getting us to safe harbor. But the other one, which I believe is 32 houses that look like Boyd's, so they're considered condos, but they're standalone homes, or maybe even more like Cleary Circle off of Seacon, because I think it's all the same developer. Only 25% of them will be affordable. So,
Okay, thank you. A question here in the front, yes.
So just to tee off on that exact point, I think a lot of this this redevelopment was pitched as a way that the town was going to be able to try and not prevent 40B, but steer it, have more control over what it looked like, and be able to push that commercial development. When in fact, it sounds like the reality of it is, if you're lucky, maybe you get 25%. The rest ends up as parking. You get the benefit of the huge residential, but we're going to take off the table, as she said, of that move. When you look at the towns that have made it to safe harbor, they have all done it via apartments, right? And we're proposing taking that one advantage that we get out of that 40B process, and the one thing that can steer us away from it, and we're going to take it off the table. In the form of, now we're only going to get 25% of that to count.
And end up with the same.
And end up with the same results.
Density.
And lack of a commercial, I mean, the survey was a walkable downtown, so I ask the question again, walkable to what?
But it's, I mean, the numbers you say are true, but you're talking about 0% of commercial in 40Bs is the reality. And while the reality that I've expressed that the town of Dedham's reporting on is 25%, 25% is a greater number than 0.
Are they have they reached safe harbor?
Yeah,
Right,
Over
so
10%.
so they have some protection against that 40B moving forward,
which
right?
is why they did a moratorium.
Right, a protection that we do not have.
Right.
Well, that just, okay, so that.
But one could say that the value in their mixed use is the commercial tax base bill,
Right.
not the residences.
Right. I was gonna just ask
but
you to
at
clarify that
25%.
number, right? Because you said that it was, for every 35 cents, they were getting $1 in tax revenue,
Yes.
right? So this does increase our tax base for the town, which is
Sure.
something that is irrespective of whether
But-
people like the zoning, is something that we're dealing with, right?
It is,
Like-
but Blythe said in the last meeting that we don't have a commercial tax base in this town, that everyone pays the same amount and the same rate regardless of whether it's residential or commercial, so.
Right, but you're
And it's all based
replacing-
on your square footage.
But there's a
so.
floor that could have been
Because we
rental
haven't hit
units,
the
and now you're
number
replacing it
to
with
have a
commercial.
split rate yet.
Right, but then correct me if I'm wrong, didn't you say that you, even if we got to that number, that you didn't see a benefit in splitting the rate? That the
Yes.
towns who had done that weren't really,
Most keep a single tax rate because the
Right.
savings.
So
I'm not
never
saying,
gonna
I'm
use
not,
that.
Is
I'm
not
not saying we
really-
should have a different tax rate,
No,
I'm
no.
saying that we are replacing potential residents with commercial commerce versus adding more residents.
I have
The
no,
value-
Right.
The value
Yeah,
of the
I would
commercial
like to-
property isn't the split tax rate, it's that commercial property is significantly more valuable than residential property.
Taxes, yeah.
Right.
So
Taxes.
there's a higher return on the same size property being commercial.
Without adding a resident, the burden of a resident.
Yeah.
Sounds terrible to say, but.
correct. I think everyone agrees that we would like to see mixed use versus straight residential.
Right.
I think the point is that we're trying to narrow the focus of the zoning to ensure that there are no loopholes to the developers who, I'm sorry, there are a lot of developers who only want residential. They don't actually want commercial, but they don't necessarily wanna go 40B. right? Because of all the hassles that entails. So if they can find a way to get through this, putting in residential, saying they'll put in commercial, but they're never actually putting in commercial. We have examples of that in this town already with a developer in this town who owns another parcel in the B1 area. So to say it's not gonna happen is incorrect. That would happen. It has already happened. So we need to narrow the focus of the zoning, not widen it. Not saying that we don't open it up to, you know, a little bit taller, a little bit bigger, maybe having a couple more bedrooms. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about specifically language that's specific about the requirements for commercial. I think a lot of the people who are going to want to try to develop in that area, irrespective of a few people who maybe wanted to put a restaurant in, most of them are going to want to put in apartment units and call it commercial on the bottom, parking, a laundromat for their tenants, and a community space for their tenants. That doesn't help us as a town. And it doesn't create any more of a walkable downtown other than the people who live here who live in those units who walk to the train. It doesn't create the walkable New England downtown that you're talking about. So we need to make sure that we're condensing it, the zoning requirements, so that we do ensure we get that tax base. If somebody wants to build 40B and they want to build straight apartment units, they're going to do that anyway, and we're going to have no say in it. So trying to scare people into approve this, or else you're going to get straight residential 40B. If that's what they want, they're going to do it anyway. That's not a reason to change your zoning that's going to affect you for the next 200 years in this town, just because you're scared of something. In all honesty, from what I understand, one more unit gets us to safe harbor. So changing our zoning to reflect something because we're scared of 40B is almost like cutting off your nose to spite your face. You're doing it so that no 40Bs will come in, but if you get to safe harbor, you can say no anyway, or you can at least slow it down. You have to still, approve them as they come through the queue, but it's at a much slower rate once you hit safe harbor, and you have a lot more say.
So, thank you. Appreciate you here listening. Are there any questions or follow-up points that you wanted to make before? I know we're getting a lot of input. You're doing a lot of writing, which is great. Do you have any comments you wanted to add or questions yourself?
I think the comment that I would make is that this report, just to clarify, is a reflection of the process as it concluded, last November with that town meeting effort. So it includes the recommendations as they stood at that time. So don't be super disappointed that this plan isn't yet speaking the types of recommendations that you want it to. But our effort and our goal over the next few months and however long it takes, I guess, is to continue to mold and craft these recommendations in the context of the comments we're hearing this evening and that we heard previously in the lead up to the November special town meeting. And we will be trying to get the zoning right so that everyone feels that it can be supported. That's our ambition.
Which is great, and I appreciated your comments about trying to balance my notes here. We obviously want to attract development. We have too many empty lots. Walkable, having some businesses to go to would be great, but at the same time protect the community interests. I think we probably use a lot more of the latter, or at least folks' perception of how those are being addressed. We have some advisory board questions, just to kind of shift it back here to the members for a second. Please.
One thing I heard that I'd love some clarification on. So you said that Denham put the moratorium in place because they did that when they hit their safe harbor number?
No, it was more just related to they had some larger mixed-use development projects, not in Denham Square actually, outside of the square, that were on the horizon that they were concerned about in terms of the overall impacts on the town's services.
What were their concerns?
The scale of those developments. So these were two or three developments that were in the 200, 250 unit range.
What was the lot size?
I don't know.
Could you put a 200 unit in the green lots?
It would. The answer is yes, but it would depend upon the density.
Right. Well, within the recommendations you had on the density.
No.
So just back up and clarify.
Yeah.
Okay, so when Josh is comparing to Denham, Denham has municipal sewer. Okay, so the wastewater capacity in those developments is much greater than we have in Norfolk Center.
Right.
So to get the density that you would wanna have on that 5 acre piece does not exist under the wastewater treatment plant that's there today connected to that property. We will require a wastewater treatment plant to be put in to get that density out of that 5 acres. So that would be so to finance and make that happen on that 5 acre piece includes a wastewater treatment plant that's gonna have more than 10,000 gallons a day to make it happen. Denham does not have it. You hook a pipe up to the municipal sewer and you have the density that's there.
I might answer that question with the numbers that are currently in the zoning and or the proposal, right? So it's 16 units per acre. The largest site in town would support 72 units.
Right.
Right. So at 40B, that unit cap that does not exist. Which is why Josh
Right.
said you could put 200 units there if you built an apartment tower.
In a wastewater
Does anyone know
treatment plant.
what's Dedham's population? Does anyone know?
It's about 30,000,
Yeah, it's like
a little below
20,000.
30,
30.
so
Yeah.
I realize this may be way back than at the map, but if Dedham as a town at 30,000 fears a 200 unit, forget the wastewater, but they fear a 200 unit development because of the strains it's gonna put on the town such that they put a moratorium.
Several too.
So we can, well, we're facing, I mean, we're just scale everything down by a third. And we're an 11,000 person town and we're gonna fear the density at a third of 200 units can fit on these parcels, even with the wastewater we have, and we're facing several of them. I think it's actually analogous of a situation. If Dedham, we should ask the question, if Dedham is putting a moratorium out of fear for developments at that scale, why would that same scale be okay? That's not for us. We don't have to look at the raw numbers, we should look at it from a scaled perspective, right? Dedham's 3 times the size, we're 1/3, we should be concerned about developments 1/3 the size, and not just say, well, a 200 unit development can't happen here. It's gonna be a matter of scale, and I think these parcels at the density that we're talking about and that's recommended is still proportional to what Dedham is now saying no on.
So the thing is, the proposed recommendation was 16 units per acre in the zoning
But
recommendation.
you asked for a special permit up to how many?
Up to how, we didn't actually get to that part where there was a high-end cap of it. So the Dedham, while is comparable as it related to the town, the projects that are of scale that the town of Dedham is concerned about is around Legacy Place. Okay, that's where they're concerned about the scale of much larger. And so the amount of acreage in the town of Dedham that allows for mixed-use development is much greater than we're talking about Norfolk Center. Does not have density caps on it, as you heard from the presentation. Has the wastewater and water infrastructure to support it, and the market that would support building all that infrastructure. So it's, as you said.
Yeah, you seem to be saying that Dedham's really not a good example.
not a
for
good
comparison.
And if you heard Josh's preface this, okay, when he said that, he's right.
There isn't.
And having worked there, okay, because that's where I came from, the reason why they put a moratorium is because it is working, and there was a real push between the community of not wanting to see mixed-use development because it had changed the character of their town-wide, not just Denham Square. So
So is that a good thing? That doesn't sound like a positive. I mean, I'm not interpreting it as they're happy with their
The result.
choice.
Right.
Am I right that I'm
They were
hearing
not
that?
happy with, there was people who grew up in town for many years
Yes.
and had a vision of the town one particular way, but they had already zoned it to allow for high density.
Okay.
Existed.
Sounds eerily familiar.
No, it's not. It's not comparable. To compare,
So it's a bad example.
It's really tough to compare Dedham to the town of Norfolk. All right? I
Agreed.
mean, look at the map on the screen.
Right.
We're essentially talking about
Focus.
6
sites.
Right, we're not comparing to them. I have a question.
Alright.
I have an actual question.
Oh, and I'm sorry,
For-
Susan, because I don't.
No,
so-
no, that's not what I meant. I meant that doesn't
If you
have
keep it
anything to do
brief,
with
then
Dedham.
we're
I
gonna go-
apologize.
We've-
When you said 16 units is what is in the plan,
Mhm.
but it says that you can ask for a special permit to get more. And if you're worried about the wastewater and what you can't hook up to a treatment plant, so you'd have to put in a septic, the developer would have to put in a septic. On the 5-acre parcel, just for hypotheticals, on the 5-acre parcel, how many units could fit there with a septic if they were approved through special permit? What is that maximum number that could go there? I think that's what,
With just septic?
yeah, if they put in, because they're not gonna build a $10 million waste treatment plant, so,
It's 10,000 gallons a day.
right,
So
so,
it's.
How big is Al Quagliare's property as an example, like we could extrapolate out from that, how many acres is that?
2.5 acres.
And that's 60 units,
So
so if we,
120?
so 120 plus.
It's still capped out at the flow, so the cap.
But he was able to fit 60 on
So
2.5.
use a high number, 120.
Okay.
so on a
120
five,
on 5 acres.
on 4 acres, so another 150 could go there with septic, without needing to go into the waste treatment area.
No.
120.
Once you go above 10,000, you're in a wastewater treatment plant. That's it. 10,000 is the cap.
Yeah.
Okay, how many units can you do
Well,
at
it's-
10,000?
It
10,000,
depends
it's-
on the bedroom mix,
Yeah.
but you can max out a Title V septic system at around, say, 90 units. Depending on the mix of 1 and 2 bedrooms.
Okay, so we'll say that 90 can go in there.
I also
that's
think
fine.
that, and perhaps my impression's wrong, I think the thrust of your presentation was about Denham Square. You were trying to talk about, I'm sorry?
That is correct.
Trying to talk about Denham Square, what happened to Denham Square before and after. Appreciate that Denham in totality is actually different in some substantial ways, especially around Legacy Place, but I think what you guys were trying to do is to just carve out and say, look, in this small section, which could be, well, that I think is a bit more analogous to us than when you factor in Legacy Place and, you know, the MBTA or the train stop there and whatnot.
If I could redirect on this just a touch. So I liked, from a planning perspective, the ability to look at Dedham because they have gone through mixed-use zoning. They have more than most places, projects that are completed and permitted, and now they've actually gone through a technical analysis of what those impacts to the town were. So that was the perspective of bringing Dedham forward. I think your reaction is a cautionary tale in terms of me bringing project comparisons forward from other communities, and I've gotten that before, so it's good to have a reminder. So, one thing I do want to say and make sure that's very clear, though, that the lesson learned here is not to be thinking about things like development moratoriums. I think that was a pretty dramatic maneuver that not only Dedham, but some other communities within the region have done. And it doesn't actually change the market dynamics, which a lot of people are reacting to out of fear. It actually exacerbates those problems. So I think that things like moratoriums are very kind of dramatic situations that communities find themselves.
No one's looking at moratorium. It was simply a clarification. I thought I heard someone say they put a moratorium once they hit the level, and I was trying to clarify that, and then it went in 1,000 different directions. So
Right.
that was cool. So I have an actual question.
Actually, David's been waiting. Mr. Lutz, if I could just redirect to David.
Well, I'm
Very
going
patient.
to change the subject slightly, but during the fall conversations about this, there was some discussion about a lot of the impetus, for lack of a better word, for some of these changes came from discussions with the parcel owners. And I want to know, and it's probably a question for Rich rather than you, I don't know, but was it just the parcel owners of those 3 green parcels, or was it other owners? Because to say that those are the only redevelopable lots down there, I mean, Quagliare is knocking down.
Okay, so good.
He's knocking down a strip mall, and there's another one right next to it.
So I met.
And so that,
Yeah.
you know, there are other parcels that could be
Yes, so with
enhanced.
both Josh and I we had the meeting with the property owners.
And
So
was
Mr.
it more
Quagliare
than
was,
just these?
so
ones?
Mr. Quagliare was actually even there at the
Right.
meeting. Mr. Ruggieri was there, who was across the street where, so it's Linden's right, I think, right? Where the cable studio is. He's expressed interest in, well, one, to be able to have connection to the wastewater treatment, because he'd like to consider mixed use down the road on that particular property, and the advantage to be able to do that. Mr. Pizzini, who has the property over here on Rockwood Road, that is another site that's on, it's on,
The dry cleaner.
yeah, where the dry cleaner is.
Yeah.
Norfolk Food Mart.
Yep.
Norfolk
All right.
Oh, yeah.
would be interested. And then, as you probably
Be
recall.
interested in redeveloping as a mixed use?
Yeah,
He's gonna have a tough time without wastewater.
right, so, I mean,
Massively
that's a,
tough time without
yeah,
wastewater.
that's a piece of, and then Dunkin' Donuts, as we probably have discussed before, they would like to put, they had come before the planning board with a mixed-use proposal adjacent, right next to Dunkin' Donuts, so we could do a standalone building and make, some changes to the site, and when they came before the planning board, the discussion became, for them, if they had access to the sewer, they wouldn't have to put a septic system on the property, which would then allow them more flexibility to redevelop that property and do, there's a building, not to compare, but he's an owner of the property, he lives in Westwood, but there's a mixed-use building in Islington Center, that's commercial on the floors, 16 apartments above it. He would like to be able to replicate something that, on that particular property, with an upgrade to the Dunkin' Donuts there.
Where am I gonna buy my Christmas tree?
I was just gonna say, is that the Lions lot where they
I'm
sell
kidding.
Christmas
I'm
trees?
right.
So,
Trying to
yes,
lighten
that
the
is,
mood a
that
little
is
bit.
the Lions lot.
It
Correct.
brings in lots of tax.
So any other responses to David's question?
Yeah, can I add to what Rich is saying, please, real quick?
Sure.
I have to say that all of the lots that were just mentioned are roughly the size of the 18 Union Street lot, which, as Josh mentioned in his presentation, the 18 Union Street development essentially maxed out the development size of that lot. So the building that everybody likes in town is the type of building that would end up on all of those lots that Rich just mentioned.
Under the current zone.
And that went under current zoning, without the
Which
change.
is why they don't wanna do it. They were
Not-
interested in
Not the one where
changes.
Norfolk Food Mart is.
No, but the current
You're
zoning
talking about
for the
where Dunkin'
credit
Donuts is,
union,
Yeah. Where
Aaron is saying those other lots are comparable in size.
Dunkin' Donuts is, not Linda's Variety Strip Mall and not the
No, that's
Norfolk
all.
Mart Strip Mall. Those are probably closer to the Borks area, which is 2.5 acres, which is 60 units.
Not an effort.
Quick response, and then we'll,
Just to clarify on this diagram too, we've been dwelling a lot, rightfully so, on the green colored parcels on this diagram, but the yellow parcels are ones that we saw as longer term redevelopment opportunities
Right.
that don't have the same characteristics, not being vacant, but do have building to land value equations where it would look like they'd be able to consider redevelopment at some point.
So to clarify, I think in the introduction you said this would apply largely to the green, but it doesn't apply to the entire B1 district, right?
Just the inner,
It applies to B1 core. There's a
Everything on that map.
no,
It's highlighted.
no.
A distinction
Okay.
between B1 out, which is outside the core, and B1 core is basically this side of, I think it's pretty much, that's right, Rich? It's-
And then the
That's
two
core.
properties on
And
Rockwood
this
Road
is
and Dunkin' Donuts, just the Dunkin'
out.
Donuts, yeah.
Yeah.
two outliers.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the out, it's within the B1 zoning, but it's called outside of B1 core. And
Rich, the two on
we're
Boardman,
focused on the core.
The two on Boardman, they're in the core.
they're in the core, right?
Yeah.
So, in that vein, while we're having that discussion, I realize that those two properties were included within the B1 core, not as part of the zoning issue. Why are we not looking at those two lots and saying, hey, if we're going to do this smart and we're gonna do this responsibly, why aren't we looking to pull those out? Because clearly, unlike all of those others that abut Main Street, those are the only two residential homes on commercial lots that are in an entirely residential neighborhood. There's no commercial on there with the exception of Peter's property on the corner of Boardman and Main. Why are we not saying, hey, I realize they weren't they were already included, why aren't we taking them out?
So I would say that it's not considered that they couldn't be taken out. We ended, because this is the conclusion of part one of the story, so to speak.
Yeah.
And I would say that the comments that you made and others have made during this meeting is going into part two. So,
Well, a lot of the pushback that I heard from my neighbors, because I'm, you know, directly abut the yellow, directly abut the blue from the backside, and everybody that I talk to that is within my neighborhood, that nobody even knew that that was part of this. So I think if we're gonna bring this to the town, it's important to make sure everybody understands what we're including and should we be including all of it.
Okay, thank you for that. Next question.
We had a question back several months ago about talking about what primary building was versus secondary building, and I'm hoping you can talk a little bit more about that, especially because I'm hearing a difference between what that would be versus what Dedham did. So Dedham would say the entire bottom floor of the building has to be commercial. My understanding is that the initial recommendation was that would actually only be true in the Norfolk plan on the primary building, but not secondary buildings. So if you could talk a bit about that, and also how would you define a primary building, especially on a lot that is surrounded by multiple streets, like which is considered the primary facing building? So.
Yeah, so primary, we were trying to define a difference on some of, again, thinking about some of those larger sites that you could potentially have a development that would come forward with multiple buildings on a site. So we were thinking about language that could define, making sure that you have a mixed-use building on the frontage of a street. So if it is a corner property, they would actually have to be dealing with 2 frontages then, and that's the way the language was defined. The difference in defining the difference between a primary and a secondary building was making sure that we could allow for a residential-only structure off of that street frontage. So they could do mixed use on the street frontage, which would get you the goals that we're talking about for a walkable, active town center, and then have the benefit from a development financial feasibility perspective of a residential building that would be off of the frontage. So that was the relationship we were trying to create. It's a little different from what Dedham did, because I think Dedham's parcels in Denham Square are actually a little bit more compact parcels. They don't have the ability to put multiple buildings on a site there. So does that give a little more context?
It does. I mean, that was my assumption based on going to Denham Square and really liking it, but full disclosure. But yeah, I mean, they're very kind of narrow, so I can't see a secondary building. But I also think it's a concern people have had about how do we stop people from kind of using that as a loophole, right? To say like, oh, well, here's the primary building. And especially on ones that have multiple streets all around it, you have to have all 3 sides, you know, how do you kind of make that work?
If I might jump in on that one, sorry, I didn't introduce myself. I'm Aaron Hunt, member of the planning board, the B1 zoning committee. And to pick up on what Josh is saying, there's really only 2 sites that support multiple building development in town. One of them is the site that we just talked about where the proposal came before the planning board, the greenish triangle one up there, and the other one is the one between the Walgreens and the MBTA lot, right? As a member of the B1 committee,
Have
we,
multiple buildings, right?
So, what was the question? Go ahead.
Except for all the other lots that have multiple buildings on them right now.
Right.
fine, we're talking about multiple large buildings, I think. I'm not explaining myself very well. Give me another minute.
Okay.
So another thing I want to get at is that Josh is an advisor to the B1 committee. So these recommendations he's making are the recommendations of the MAPC. They're putting in a report. They aren't necessarily the recommendations to the town. The B1 committee is making recommendations to the planning board, who's then making the recommendations to the town. So just keep in mind Josh's role there. The last thing I want to mention is there have been some discussions by the committee to address some of the concerns that were raised leading up to the last town meeting conversations. And one of them is that the primary secondary building definition was difficult, was cumbersome, was hard to understand. There were conversations about a maximum square footage. I think we're taking all of that into account, and the primary secondary language is in all likelihood going to move out. There's going to be a max cap. We've been talking about somewhere in the neighborhood of 25,000 for a building. So again, when you start talking about multiple buildings, you're now talking about multiple 25,000 square foot buildings where there's only 2 lots in town that could support multiple 25,000 square foot buildings.
Of that size. Okay, thank you for clarification.
One follow-up on that, is it possible to subdivide those lots? Or is there a need to have a zoning that requires that, or can we have an expedited lot division process?
So one of the One of the part two recommendations is to remove PMLD as an option, which allows for small lots. That's where you,
Excuse me.
PMLD, what does that mean?
planned multi-lot development, which would create lots that are 4,000 square feet that are having shared, infrastructure as far as stormwater, wastewater, et cetera. Right now, so the recommendation came forward that it's 30,000 square feet is the minimum lot size. But if you go through a PMLD, you can then subdivide into smaller lots. One of the recommendations, I know that it's in the report, when you get a chance to read it, for consideration, is to remove that provision. So to be able to subdivide below, if that goes through and gets through, approved, 30,000 is the minimum square lot size in the center of town.
Thank you
So,
for the
but my question is, can you divide? And I'm not sure.
You can divide.
Okay.
You can.
Okay, thank you. Next question.
Yeah, so I thought the survey was a great idea, and we don't have the results here. But one of the things that I don't remember, I remember restaurants being high on the list. I don't remember additional housing choices as being a prominent issue. And when I read the report, one of the prime drivers for this is additional housing choices, or different types of housing choices. Now, I think my personal opinion is that I think some is important, but I don't feel like that's a driver for us to do this. I think part of what we're trying to do is, at least reflected in the survey and reflected from my neighbors, is that we want additional retail. We want a vibrant downtown, but I remember additional housing choices as a big part of that. Am I wrong? Was that?
No, you're correct. And I think unless you've been a part of all these conversations, it might seem like a little bit of sleight of hand, maybe on my part, but the residential units aren't as preferred from the community. That is clear. And I think that's clear from everyone. But I think what we've been articulating again and again is that from our view, the residential units are completely necessary to make financially viable development projects.
For the cost of the land.
Mm-hmm. Yes, so we'll end because the marketplace for residential units in contexts such as Norfolk Center is much better than the marketplace for commercial space. So you're actually subsidizing small amounts of commercial space with larger amounts of residential units. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the model of development that's been happening throughout the region.
Mixed use.
Yeah, so
It
mixed
also
use.
makes the commercial space more viable over time.
Yeah. So that's we're trying to be very clear about that we hear you, that trying to put a cap on or limit the amount of residential space is a desire of the community. That's understood, but we're also trying to find a happy balance where you will actually get viable development projects come forward that have hopefully an acceptable amount of residential uses, which I would, in ways I've outlined in the presentation, I think those residential units have a lot of benefits to the town. But aside from that, they're completely necessary to bring the development forward.
I think that point is understood and that was clear. I don't want to speak for everyone, but the general heebie-jeebies with this as an approach is all the data points we have are that the actual commercial aspects is going to be 25% rented. So we're taking a lot of residential for a small amount of commercial development. I understand the economics, you have to do the residential to get the commercial, but are we willing to take that many more kids in the school system and that big of a drain on the other town services for a small commercial aspect?
I think what could be interesting is
that's where the concern is and the pushback is, and all the data points we have, the Denham one, the Mansfield one, is none of these commercial mixed-use things are actually coming to fruition in the way that it was sold to the town. Right, it's either 25% rented, or it's turning into a parking lot, or the developers are coming back saying, I can't rent it, can we put some more residential space in there? You don't want it to sit empty, we'd rather have something there than nothing. It's turning into the laundromat, it's turning into the rec center. It's not bearing the fruit that was promised, and I think every example that's been brought to us, not that I'm seeking, things that have been brought here, right to us as the examples that we're holding up, it's showing extremely low uptake, penetration of the commercial aspects. And I don't think with the school system is stressed as it is, the space we have in the schools, the projections of the residential growth with the 40Bs. I personally don't think that it is worth the trade-off for a small amount of commercial development for the additional stress it's gonna put on the town, and I don't see that this being a net gain from a tax perspective.
One comment I would want to follow up with that is, I appreciate that 25% seems small compared to 100. I would like 100% being full. I would like to understand, maybe future examples can address this. I mean, what is a good expectation? I mean, 25% compared to perhaps 40 is something which is really, really big. Maybe that is high penetration, so appreciate that 25%, I agree, that doesn't seem like a whole lot. I don't have any context. If there's more context to that story, or perhaps we're not looking at the right scale, that would be helpful. Comments?
Well, but as far as data points go, I believe you said that 2 data points were that, I don't know if it was Dedham or another town, but there weren't additional kids in these units. That was,
Yeah.
That's the point I want to, I mean, I get the data points that you're talking about, but the data does not, across the board, suggest kids are coming, these are 1-bedroom apartments.
and the data also suggested that there was a return on the investment.
Yes. Right.
That more was brought in than was spent in the town. So,
In
yes,
Dedham.
yes, but,
No,
but if
actually-
we're talking about data points, those are 2 data points, and
If
we're
you,
pulling other
if
data
you,
points in
if you
Dedham.
dig back, and there is other work in here in the report outside of Dedham, of the positive fiscal benefit of mixed use outside Dedham, okay, that, and I forget which ones they were in here.
It usually ranges, in terms of that ratio, the return on the dollar, so for every dollar received from the town, they expending, the ranges for mixed-use projects are typically falling between that 35-cent range, which I expressed from Dedham's examples, to 50 cents on the dollar. So you're still getting 50-cent in revenue in terms of what you're spending in services. MAPC did a very extensive database study on the entire region, comparing the production of housing units with the school enrollment figures. And they found from a data perspective, absolutely no correlation between the two. So some towns are producing a whole bunch of units and their school enrollments are going down. Some towns are not actually producing units, their school enrollments are going up. So there's not a correlation between the housing production and school enrollment.
Is that available on your website?
That is, it's called the waning influence of school enrollment on housing, or housing production on school enrollment.
I mean, the only question I do have is whether, and we've talked about this, is even if kids and people with kids are not moving into these units, is that because people are downsizing out of homes in Norfolk, moving to these units, and the people moving to those people's houses do have kids? That's the only question I do have that's not answered by that particular.
But you're not gonna stop that
So-
anyway.
Oh, correct, and, you know.
So,
it is what it is.
I think that the 2 takeaways from this are, what is a good return on bringing actual businesses to the town, not just a Potemkin village where there's some coin-operated whatnots, but actual businesses. And the second concern is, of course, impact on the school district. There was a gentleman in the front row. wanted to ask.
So I'm Chad Peck, planning board member. I think the building next door is a prime example of our current rules on that small lot, and we also discussed that works on those smaller lots. That building was a big success. I think we can all agree, big success. We like the architecture of it. That first floor, it's my understanding, I could be wrong, it's my understanding that first floor commercial rented out in a heartbeat. And before the units rented out above. In fact, I think there's 1 or 2.
I was gonna say, aren't there still rental units available?
I think there's 1 or 2 apartments that are still for rent. But, so that was an example of, we built it and it was sold out immediately. Now, I can't guarantee that everything else we build from here on out will have that same success.
Or that the developer who builds it actually wants to rent that space out.
Could be, we
Because
don't know.
there are
Right.
developers who don't want that.
Right, so I think it's good that we're all here, we're all talking. You know, I realize that there's a lot of different, you know, people at different points in their life and in this community, and they have different perspectives on this. But change is coming to our town here. I mean, we are changing, we are growing, and so I think it's all about, we need to be prepared for that change. And we need to try and control it as best as we can. And I do think that the current rules we have in place aren't controlling the change the way we want it. And so, and I don't know what the correct changes are yet, and that's why we're all here talking, but we do need to make some changes.
Thank you. And anyone who hasn't had a chance to speak at all yet, I think I've heard from just about all the advisory board members. Anyone else? Oh, yeah, please, go ahead.
So I had a question to follow up. I think for me, the going forward direction would be towards the kind of the basis of it, which is what are those barriers to market rate development? And when, on your slide, it said the barriers are, and we've talked about here, there's not enough residential mixed in, and then the recommended zoning change are slope pitches and height of building. I don't see that as being congruent. I understand the other pieces, but I think the recommended changes should clearly answer what's there. And when we have 40B who can go around the zoning requirements, they didn't maximize those. They didn't go to 3.5 stories, right? They're not there. So like that wasn't the barrier to market rate. So I just would like to know at some other time, like which of the zoning changes directly respond to barriers to market rate development, and which ones are other things we want to do while we're opening up the zoning changes.
Response? Responses?
Well,
I mean, it's just a going
Yeah,
forward thing.
I think I would say all of the changes, I mean, it's a pretty streamlined set of changes based upon the discussion we had in the previous process, that I would say everything we were doing was, we felt, a necessary change to get rid of those barriers that we're talking about.
Well, so there were other things that were like specifically targeting the grocery store use of one particular lot, basically. And I don't know if that, like.
That, we were trying to, I think, correct some previous language that was put in there for a very specific use and address it moving forward.
Well, I think when you said that you weren't trying to do a sleight of hand, I don't think that you were. I don't think you were. But what I would like to convey, and I'm not speaking for the entire advisory board, but there were some of us who felt like that's exactly what happened. The town says they want a walkable downtown, nobody ever said they wanted apartment units. But, oh wait, we have to put apartment units in because developers won't build unless they can have apartment units. So it is kind of a slight, because that's not what the town wanted. Again, I understand, a developer isn't going to do it unless they're gonna make money. I get that. And again, with the specific 5-acre lot next to Walgreens and MBTA, it's owned by leased by Stop and Shop. So you put language in that says no grocery store can go in. Well, that only benefits, that only forces Stop and Shop to give up the lease. That's all that does. So if Stop and Shop holds on to the lease, nothing goes in. So clearly that is designed to benefit another developer, someone who wants to come in and put a mixed-use property. Because as long as we have a requirement allowing grocery stores here, Stop and Shop will never give up that lease. So it was actually a backdoor way of forcing Stop and Shop to walk away so that a developer could come in and build something there. And so I do think that there were people, I'll just go ahead and say it, myself included, who felt like there was a lot of underhanded, I'm not gonna really say why we're doing this thing, but this is why we're doing it. As far as changes to these zoning things.
Well, without getting into motives, but
Without getting into
appreciate
motives,
that-
we're not saying that that's what you were doing, because we don't think that
never
anyone on
thought
the
of
one
it
had
coming
any ulterior motives. We're saying that's the way it appeared to people as well as voters.
Understood.
So as a committee, we've taken that under advisement and we've changed some of the language, or we're talking about changing some of the language related to that. And again, putting the cap on all development.
Not
So
making it targeted.
that should be addressed.
Well, I was gonna say, I mean, I've been very clear, even in my presentation this evening, that from my perspective, one of the main purposes here is to encourage mixed-use development. So all of those changes are actually to pave the way for encouraging mixed-use development, including the trying to untangle the situation with the Stop and Shop leasehold. And it may seem like we're trying to, or maybe I'm seeing this from a perspective of trying to serve developer interests or something, but I'm actually trying to serve the interest of attracting mixed-use development. And so I'm trying to untangle all of the issues that I see, whether they be leaseholds or zoning issues, and trying to, through the zoning language, which is the most impactful way that we have to control these relationships, make some ground on those. So, and I mean, these processes often, as they move along, get a little contorted and twisted as we're trying to, try to satisfy several different perspectives and interests. But I think all along that, and that's what we will be returning to, is balancing, I think, as was succinctly stated, the attraction of mixed-use development with the balancing of protections to the community. I think those are the two center points of the work we're trying to do.
Any other comments, please? Go ahead.
Yeah, and I think there's a little mischaracterization, Susan, when you talk about, we're talking about apartment buildings. Everything that I think our zoning's talked about is first floor retail. That's where your streetscape is, that's where your interaction with residents and consumers are. If there's an apartment or two apartments above it, that's not affecting the streetscape. So I don't think anybody's talking about apartment buildings per se, like you walk into the lobby of an apartment building. I think everything that we've anticipated is for first floor retail because the prime objective is a streetscape for the residents. So.
Yeah, and I think we all agree with that.
Well, I think that was a mischaracterization.
Well,
We talked about
I
apartment
think the
buildings.
point though is that while mixed use is clearly the shared intention,
Yeah.
I think the concern, and this is brought up repeatedly, is that, well, how much of the first floor actually happens? I mean, I appreciate we have the dance studio next door, there are some examples of it. Folks have other concerns based on other experiences of, again, the kind of Potemkin village on the first floor,
Yeah.
where those things stay empty, or they turn into something which is more of a convenience, a fitness studio for the apartments, rather than what we would really consider. But I think we have that shared goal. Yes.
Can I just ask the timeline? I think I heard Josh say 2021, town meeting 2021, and I just want to make the point, is this was tried, what you originally recommended, you tried to, or the committee tried to say, let's put it out to the townspeople.
We're ready.
In November, it's ready, the report wasn't ready, we didn't have that information, and now this discussion and multiple discussions that has happened previously have raised many concerns where we're in some ways going back to the drawing board on no cap. So I think I'd like to understand the true timeline, because I thought it was going to be brought back in the May town meeting. Springtown meeting. And so it feels like recommendations are great. I think people have to understand where they come from, but there have been changes even from November to now that are significant, and there's still people saying, yeah, but what about this? And I think, you know what, the optics maybe weren't great with the whole Stop and Shop thing. You got a lot of things you got to work with. I think even that this meeting is in this little tiny room speaks to we need a different approach to get more people. Only 5% of the people responded to the survey. They said nobody in the survey, which is why I want to see the results, said, oh, please give us more housing downtown. And I appreciate you need housing to get commercial, and that's the whole mixed use. So I'd like to have a better understanding of the real timeline, because you're saying town meeting 2021, which is 18 months?
So, just to be clear, like in this room, we need to figure out what the timeline is. There is no secret real timeline or agenda.
Okay.
Rich and I have just actually worked on behalf of the town to gain more free money to the town, a grant from Mass Housing to pay for my time and to support this effort. So, we need to work with the committee and the town and everyone else to understand, like, we don't even have the contract signed for that new grant yet, so I'm here voluntarily this evening. But once that is defined, and once we understand what the changes from where we're at today, I mean, obviously the conversation is still where it's at, so we need to figure out how to get the zoning to be in alignment where the conversations are less contentious than this. And then decide if we're ready to go for the November, another November special town meeting this year, maybe, I don't know.
Okay.
If we're ready to go for May 2021, we're certainly not ready to go for a May 2020.
Right.
Do we have an idea of a timeline for a final presentation of this is what we're gonna run with?
No.
Okay.
We do not. The timeline is taking shape. I think we're not trying to hide anything. In full disclosure, there was a moment after we concluded in November where we thought maybe there was enough momentum and support, potentially, that we could run with what we have and try to think about ways to get it to go for May 2020. But we've reconsidered that, and I think it was
wise,
a good move, given what the conversation is. But now, the timeline, we need to figure that out, and we'll be defining that over the next few weeks or a month or two.
Anyone from the planning board or zoning board want to comment on that?
As a committee member, we have a rough working timeline, which we'd like to go public with at the right time. We were really looking to get out of this meeting tonight. getting a lot of comments from the advisory board at the end of last year. So I think we have
Yes, we did.
we have a committee meeting following this meeting, and we hope to make basically decisions on a lot of the things that Josh has mentioned. What's our end goal? How are we gonna get there? How many meetings are we gonna have between now and then? How are we gonna involve the public? Are we gonna do another survey? All of that stuff. So it's
Is
all-
that meeting open to the public that you're gonna have the planning board, or is that?
The B1 committee meetings are all public.
Okay.
Yep.
Encourage folks to attend.
Well, they will be televised
When is it?
as well.
I don't think they have a date yet.
Yeah, we do.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, it's good.
When's the next meeting?
Checking calendars as we speak. Yes?
So, Josh, is it also safe to assume, I think you know the answer to this, mixed use is kind of the vehicle to get a developer to make a property viable? Okay, that's one piece of it. The other piece is, do we not need some of this additional residents in the downtown to help support the commerce in the downtown?
Yeah.
Because if we don't have apartments or condos or something above these first floor commercial properties, why would these commercial properties exist? It's kind of the chicken or the egg. If you don't have it, it doesn't work. I mean, you have to have both to work. You can't just have commerce.
I don't know about that, because the one we're all talking about on the corner, the bank lot, the bank is not supported by the 16 apartments above it, or 8 apartments above it,
No.
however many there were, and neither is the dance studio. My kids go to that dance studio, and I don't live in that apartment. So I don't think those businesses, I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think the town itself needs businesses, irrespective of apartment buildings above them.
I think that, I've worked a fair amount with a real estate economist named Pam McKinney, and she's kind of well known in the Boston area. And one of the paradigms which she always said again and again was roofs before retail. And what she meant by that is just that you need households to support retail space.
Right.
And every household helps and counts. So the addition of a household unit, whether it be in town center or one of the surrounding areas, Boyd's Crossing, whatever they are, every household unit actually is contributing to that market. And retailers of various kinds, local mom and pop shops don't do as much, but the mid-size or national retailers are definitely looking at the socioeconomic demographics of every household within a certain catchment area. And they're doing that research every time. So every household does help in those regards.
Yes?
Are those numbers in the report? Is there a ratio or a formula that you have of density of residents translates to density of commercial?
Those types of metrics are known really only to the like each retailer has their own specific formula. I do not have those metrics in my report.
No, but you would have, but I would expect that there would be, this is a successful downtown with a vibrant commercial base, and this is the residential density that that center has, right? I mean, I would think that would be commonplace data.
Well, you would think, but actually it's not as commonplace. So there's pretty detailed economic modeling data. Esri is one of the modeling systems that does this. And you can actually strike market and submarket catchment areas for walking, driving, transit, for any community in the Boston area, wherever we have the data that we use. And the intricacy of those shapes that's drawn from this modeling program and software are astounding sometimes. So I think it is.
Is that because it often creeps beyond just the downtown?
Yes, yeah, it follows transportation routes, it follows how people get to certain places.
That speaks to that comment of that one doesn't necessarily drive the other. I mean, they are linked, no doubt, but they are not,
I don't
inseparable, I guess is my only point. And I think that's what many of the people that have had the questions about this have said, what's that density look like? What's that ratio that you're proposing look like? And I have yet to hear anybody give any kind of realistic numbers as to what we're trying to accomplish here. What's it gonna look like?
Empirically, we're somewhere between the density required for a Dunkin' Donuts and a Walgreens and a grocery store, right?
I mean, we're not resolving this question tonight.
Yeah.
Feels like a meeting already.
The one final comment that I would say is, I've seen these maps where you talk about, you want to put a business here, 5-minute commute, 10-minute commute, whatever the transportation is, you have heat maps and such, and I'm not sure you would put a lot of new residences immediately downtown that would really change a 5-minute, a 10-minute commute. I mean, this is a driving community. I'm not sure that would really tip the scale, but even talking about that, I mean, there's a lot of people I think who have a concern about, we need businesses. Why are people trying to kind of, smuggle in all these, huge apartment buildings? And it's like, well, they're not, they're trying to go for mixed use. Okay, well, I can sort of buy that. Well, no, we actually have to have a lot more population density. I don't know the optics are that, it's sort of a chicken and egg, but I'm just saying there's a lot of people who are already very concerned and a little touchy about too much residential. Like, if we have to have this much residential just to get business, they might buy in. If we're making comments about we just have to boost the density overall of residences downtown, I can see how a lot of people could take that the wrong way.
If you want a walking downtown, I do think you're gonna have to have the residents above it.
That's
Understood.
it's a
It's
philosophical
question of
decision.
density.
Right.
Yeah.
We can answer that question
Yes.
another way, right? There are vacancies in commercial properties downtown, right? They are in the older properties,
Yes.
right? All of the newer commercial properties are occupied and are doing well.
I think it speaks to it.
And are they all being rented at market rate? Is that data that we have?
That's a good question.
Like, I don't know, does the dance studio pay market rate for that?
These are all.
I
good-
know.
Yeah, but they're all good data questions which speak to, I think, whether the planning board, the zoning board, which is folks who are giving presentations, these are things that are on people's minds.
Yep.
Bringing this type of data would be extremely helpful. In the far back, a new person asking a question, yes.
Hi, I'm on the B1 working committee.
Oh, hello.
Hi. And I guess that we've heard from some of the builders in the community that suggest that they're not gonna build anything that they can't make money on. So they make more money on building apartments that they can rent than they do on retail space. They've told us that.
Mixed
To our
use, yes.
face. So I guess trying to make it all commercial isn't what they're gonna build. So I guess that's my point. You need to talk to the builders. If they're not gonna build just commercial space for people to rent, then the only way they're gonna build and we're gonna get some new things in town is if they're gonna put some residential stuff above it.
Understood, got it.
So if I can modify my forward recommendation, I think it would be cool with the answer to the commercial rate development, what are the barriers? I think there's a general consensus, you need to have mixed use to make it a commercial market rate development. What we ran into last time is there was one answer, and I don't think we understood where that one answer sat within the full range of what is the minimally viable ratio of dwellings to, what would be the most scary potential option, right? Like, so I think having some context around where the recommendation comes from within that band of just barely viable at commercial rate today to top end.
Okay, thank you.
I would also suggest a slide that says something like, what can't happen?
Yeah, right.
32,000 people move, like, I think something that just kind of lays out these what ifs, just, not even caps, so just like this, what you're envisioning happening is not gonna happen. We are not gonna have a walkable, vibrant downtown center without residential building, apartments, period. Like, so a world you wanna live in where it's just a really cute downtown and no one's added to the population is not a realistic vision. Like, I think there just needs to be some parameters set that help people as they approach your presentation to know what some of those scary moments that are not gonna happen, and then some realistic things like you can't have this without residential buildings. That's a pie in the sky dream.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just ask if Josh could also, you made a comment about mom and pop stores aren't gonna come here, right? They're not gonna survive, that it's these mid-level commercial?
we didn't say that.
Oh, you said mid-level
here said-
commercial retailers.
One of our members said.
No,
Yes.
I think I mentioned
No, I
mom and
think it
pop
was
stores
Josh.
in that they may not be doing a similar socioeconomic demographic analysis. They might just show up in a space and try to make it work, which is typical. But the national chains or other mid-level chains will be doing a household socioeconomic analysis to decide where they locate. That's
Okay,
not, that
and I guess my, to that point is, in the survey, is that what people want? Do they want those kind of commercial in downtown versus, I appreciate that the developers who purchase that land now feel like, I can't make enough money here, but we're gonna redo our whole zoning that will change our town, maybe for the better, if commercial actually moves in and you create a walkable downtown, or you just have really dense residential, and these property owners have benefited from the zoning, but it's not really what people in Norfolk want. Like, do we want Hobby Lobbies? Do we want?
I'm cool with
Starbucks?
Walgreens, I'll just say that, like Walgreens has been helpful, right?
It's
You don't
like-
have to
Yeah,
go-
no, I'm just saying in terms of asking those survey questions and really digging deep. You know, I feel like we based a lot on how much money people can make on their lots. And 5% of people responding to an online survey, that if you happen to get it, took the time to fill, I'm a researcher, response rates for online and mailed surveys are quite low. So what's the informed decision-making that we're using for this? It's gonna have huge ramifications long-term for this town.
A planning board, yes?
So speaking of scenarios, right, I mean, over the last 10 years, the town population has grown nearly 20%. It's projected to grow by that, if not more, in the next 10 years. So that 10% is another 1,000 to 1,500 people. Where are those people going?
To work, live, buy groceries?
Yes.
Exactly.
Okay, got it. Excellent question. So I think you're getting a lot of good input as to questions that are on people's minds. One little comment that I'll throw in there is I actually met some friends Friday night in Denham Square, as it turns out. We ate at the Horse Thief Tavern, which was quite good. I was surprised. There was all local mom and pop stuff around there. There was very, very, very few franchises. I mean, the lot sizes are small, but
Yeah.
that's just surprised me.
So, to that point, and to your point, actually, I think one of the things we probably should add in, you had mentioned Hobby Lobby. Well, I think we need to add in the fact that there are certain Hobby Lobby's probably not gonna go to Norfolk Town Center. And add that so that
Yes.
it, because I know people fear this is gonna happen.
Sure, I think Jackie's point's great.
Right, and
So
to
make that list.
add, that will add,
Well, it wasn't. Let me make sure that's clear.
'Cause
In
it
the
wasn't,
old plan that we had presented to us in November, it did not have a cap.
Yeah, it wasn't.
You and I discussed this. We went, Hobby Lobby was actually one of the ones, because
no,
craft
no,
stores
no,
allowed.
no,
I'm saying
let
in
me
the old
clarify
plan.
my point.
in the-
My point is
yeah.
the market,
Right.
not the zoning.
Right,
The market for Norfolk Center is not gonna attract Hobby Lobby.
today.
Today.
Yeah.
But you're changing the zoning for the next 200 years, so you need to make
And-
sure that you're
and so what I'm
putting
saying is,
into it what you
I think what
want.
we'll do is.
One at a time, please, one at a time.
We'll gain the data for the big retailers that look on the market and the locations, the transportation system, the populations hub, and see if we can project that, yeah, Hobby Lobby's gonna go in Norfolk Center in the next 10, 20, 30 years. Or it's very unlikely because it's not a hub where they wanna put a major store like that. That's the point, to kind of,
And I think a lot of these details can get
Yeah.
discussed. I think folks are hearing that we do like hearing about protections for the community, things like targeting specific zoning so it doesn't impact everywhere. Having caps is something that has been brought up repeatedly. I think it would be a good thing to continue that conversation and get into the details of
Right.
what that actually looks like, that people who are interested in protections feel protected. And I appreciate, change has to happen. Staying the same is not an option. I don't think anybody likes having empty lots, but it's about achieving the balance. There's gonna be some additional planning board meetings, some zoning board meetings. Encourage folks to attend that. I think everyone's had a chance to pretty much get their questions put forth, if not answered, I believe. I'm looking around the room here. Blythe, anything you wanted to comment on? Kevin looks like a man with things to say, a select board's
I have enough forums to talk, thank you very much.
Fair enough. Okay, any final comments
I
before
do.
we?
Just 1 second.
Yes.
This is not a question, open for debate, nothing like that. One of the reasons for it, and I'm speaking as someone who's now on the B1
Yes.
working committee group. One of the reasons for this was to actually get the input from the advisory board
Yes.
on what sorry, I'm wearing two hats here, what we would
Like to see.
put our stamp of approval on so that it can go forward at a town meeting, whether that be in the fall or in the spring. So we do actually need to, not necessarily tonight, but the B1 committee does need some direction in that sense. That's not to say the B1 committee is only gonna do what the advisory board says. That's not
Oh,
what
no,
it is.
understood.
That's not what I'm
Sure.
saying. I'm simply saying that the goal of the B1 working group is to change the zone, just because I personally bring up questions doesn't mean I'm not supporting the B1 group, obviously. The goal of that is to change the zoning laws for the town. the only way to do that is to vote with a 63%, 2/3 margin at
Okay.
town meeting.
Yes, to make it a bylaw, or a zoning.
In my experience, as well as most people's experience, if it's not supported by the advisory board, it's probably not gonna get 2/3 at town meeting. So, it's not that they're necessarily saying, hey, we're gonna do everything the advisory board
No, I
says, because
understand.
we're 10 different people who have different points of view anyway. But we do need to sort of come to a conclusion and maybe do a working outline. Maybe we could, two things that she'd like to see, two things that he'd like to see, two changes that they'd like to see, into some sort of outline to give to the B1 working group.
Okay, so question to the
Just-
advisory, okay, so.
That's not a question, I'm saying that, I think
I'm
that's,
turning it into a question.
that's something we need to do.
So question to the advisory board members, folks have various comments, things like, are we really going to attract businesses or in any meaningful percentages? The importance of caps in terms of protection, impact on schools and town resource utilization usage, town resource utilization usage, there we go. Now, do we want to get more specific and maybe circulate maybe some suggestions from the advisory board? We're usually in much more of a responsive mode than necessarily
Right.
giving input, but the same token,
Right, but
want
if
to
we
be
don't do
practical.
something like that, then all this was, excuse my language, a giant bitching session.
Comments then on
So
that?
that's what I'm saying, I think we need to put a pin in some of this and get some concise information back to the B1 working group, so that in the next meeting, we can discuss what the advisory board would approve and try to come to some sort of compromise, because not
Okay.
everything is gonna be
Understood.
agreed upon.
So Susan
not
has been,
everything.
Susan has taken notes here.
Lastly,
Oh, okay.
just because I don't wanna have to speak again.
Okay.
Never mind, I forgot.
Oh, I'm sorry, you can.
Go ahead, I will, at some point I will
Okay.
remember it, but I forgot.
So, one thing I would throw in there is, we do have
Just
notes,
remembered it.
we do have notes from this evening, which capture, I think, the basic points. We could summarize that, circulate that as an agenda item at the next meeting, and folks could then comment and say, here are things I would like to add to that as an input for consideration by the planning or zoning board. That's one thing that I'm just thinking here on the fly. Do folks have any other suggestions on the advisory board of ways to give input to our friends at the planning board and such? Yes?
Yes, I would just say that this is a very long document, and I think conversely, it would be helpful to me as an advisory board member to know what the B1 committee is really looking for input on and what they're not, right? Because there might be some things where you're like, no matter what we give input on, it's probably not gonna change.
But not on this document.
It's not on this one, because this isn't a final one, there's
Right.
already gonna be changes made, and I believe the input that the B1 working group is looking for is what language does the advisory board as a whole need to see in the warrants, specifically in the way they were worded, to be able to say, we support these, we don't support these. Those types of changes, like we talked about, where it didn't have a cap on the square footage, the advisory recommendation would be, hey, let's put a cap for everything, not just grocery stores, that kind of a thing.
If I might support what Susan is saying, sorry, real quick, just that, one of the goals of the B1 committee is going to be gathering the support of various committees in town. So we are charging Susan with getting the support of the advisory board at some point down the road. So saying exactly what she's saying in a little bit of a different way, however, whatever we need to do to gain your support kind of thing, if you guys want to make comments, if we need to be back here 2 or 3 more times, if there's, our goal is to get the support of the advisory board going into the next town meeting. Or not, and then we won't go, right, kind of thing, or maybe we will, I don't know, we haven't talked about that yet, but that's the goal of the to get the support of the advisory board. However we get there, we're open to suggestions.
And I fully agree with you, like I wanna actually make progress versus just talking about the philosophical, if we like it or not,
Well,
right?
we can do this every week,
I think
but,
my-
it's not gonna actually get us anywhere.
My personal request there would just be, instead of just say, if we build it, they will come, have some sort of projection of, if we build this much residential density, we will get this much commercial in return. I haven't seen that, like, we're just saying, we hear 25%, we hear other horror stories, we have our former gas station, which was our first mixed use, which has never been commercial
Mixed use.
anything, right? So we only have those to look at, but we haven't seen any actual projection of what do we realistically expect to have happen. We just say, well, we need to build it. If we don't build mixed use, there won't be any commercial. Okay, got it. If we build mixed use, what can we reasonably expect? how much of it will actually be of use and to the town, how much of it will sit empty, how much of it will turn into parking. I've never seen anything like that. I think if that could be, of course, it's not a guarantee, it's not a commit, it's an estimate. I think that estimate is pretty important to help weigh the decision of what do the town residents get in return for the extended, no one wants just more density, they want something in return for it.
Absolutely.
So what is the estimate of what that return will be? I've never seen that, other than, well, we have to build it or we get nothing.
Excellent.
We may build it, still get nothing, so what's the
Target.
realistic expectation? That's my ask.
Yes.
So on the flip side of that, I think it'd be helpful to have some data points about both natural forces and forces that can be written in that stop what will feel like uncontrollable growth. So what can be said in the warrant, and then what natural economic forces stop a target from coming in, right? Like I think numbers around that are just helpful for everybody. Like a target's not coming here because there are single lane roads to get into town, because we are 15 minutes from the highway, like actual, that's why target's not, so I think those are helpful, because if the bylaw doesn't support that, it feels like, well, what happens when a Target and a Hobby Lobby and a TJ Maxx, which would be excellent actually, open up downtown? I think that would be great.
I did remember my quick question, just for you to answer the next time. I wrote it down this time so I wouldn't forget. Is what Aaron made a comment that we have current commercial space that in town that is unoccupied right now, without considering the building on the corner of Boardman and Main, because he doesn't want to rent them. So I wouldn't necessarily count those as unrented. What percentage of, or what number of commercial space is currently unrented in Norfolk Center? Do you already know that? And if you don't, could you find that out for me?
I don't know.
I don't recall seeing more than one or two that are unrented.
Well, I think it's just Bassini's, but we could.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
no, it's our
That's
store,
another
but
good data point, thank you.
that's-
Any other inputs that we want to give here?
One last one, super quick. Going back in my memory from the last meeting, there were questions around assisted living, and there were a lot of special exemptions or provisions for assisted living, and that was unclear, so just having why that was part of it. And then the other big part was just making clear what is the goal of development and how the proposed changes tie into that goal. That was just never very, very clear either.
My only comment would be to have a portion of the material where you're spending about 3 to 4 times on protect the town to 1 unit of wonderful commercial output. Just because I don't think people have as many questions about the latter, they have a lot about the former. Again, it's not to say that protecting the town is 10 times as important. So I'm not trying to say that there's no risks and that change can't occur. I'm probably not articulating this very well, but I'm just saying I believe people spend more time thinking about protecting the town than really ever get presented, and then it just gets, these sort of concerns just get magnified because people don't understand the guardrails that are sometimes actually there and that you guys have thought of. We didn't go here for these reasons, or this is what we did not do for that reason. So at least spend some time talking about how you've crafted this to address the protection of the town and not just, oh, look at the upside. That's my.
Our discussion was exactly on that during our meeting around what are the unintended consequences? Because the language will be the language, and it may be intended for one thing, but how could it be used by a developer for other purposes? And I think that will be the interest of the town.
Well, I think a lot of attention needs to be paid, and it wasn't necessarily the first time around. A lot of attention needs to be paid that this change would be a one-time thing. You're gonna change it, but it's going to be in effect for 40 years.
No, we did it 10 years ago, we'll do it 10 years from now.
It's gonna change next year.
Yeah.
That changed, right? That'll do it.
Any other
Some
inputs?
of our,
No,
some of our
impacts could
current
be,
zoning
yes.
stuff hasn't been changed since the 60s. So in essence, there's a chance that these things could be in effect for 30 to 40 years,
Yeah,
maybe longer.
They're good change.
And we can't possibly, I can guarantee that 40 years ago, no one thought there would be a Walgreens in the center of town. So you can't always say that based on the way the town looks today, that that's gonna be the case. So I think a lot of attention needs to be paid to making sure that the language is in there the way we actually want it to look moving forward, long-term, long-term. Not just saying, like she said, oh, Target won't come because we don't have enough highway. Well, we don't know that in 10, 15 years, somebody's not gonna come and put a highway through Norfolk. You just don't know that. So without knowing
I mean,
how
I feel
those,
like, yeah.
I feel like we do, but that's not the point. I'm saying you never actually know.
That's true. Well, I know that 40 years ago, Walgreens would have been a Blockbuster video, so.
Well,
No, 40 years ago
Blockbuster.
it was a monster video.
No, but I mean, how many years ago did Gillette move into, did the Patriots move to Foxborough? I didn't live here, I've only lived here
60s.
11 years.
60s.
Right, so but I'm saying 40 years ago, they might not have expected that Foxborough was gonna look the way it looks today.
Understood.
That's what I'm saying.
Which is
Yes,
still not that
understood.
bustling.
Yes.
One other thing that I would hope that we could include in this is that some of the things that you talked about, Rich, about the limitations in regards to our present wastewater treatment plant. I know I saw in some of the meetings there's been some discussion about potential expansion of that. So are you planning on including the potential of the expansion and how that would reflect on the potential growth and what those changes would mean?
Yes.
I think that is important.
And I don't know if this data exists, Josh, you might know, in terms of when communities build up their downtown and people are loving it, what the benefit is to the property owner. How does that increase, because that's a plus, right? So that's a trade-off, like.
You mean to the home values?
Yeah, like to people who have invested a lot, like is it that your home values go up? Or are there communities where your home values go down, right? It would be good to just know from the data that exists already which way that goes and what the factors are that are related to that, like, because none of us who are property owners want our property values to go down in the next 20, 30, 40 years. So figuring out, is there data out there that, hey, this is good and this is how it benefits you long-term as a property investment?
So again, we appreciate the planning board, the zoning boards, looking for this type of community input as well as from the advisory board.
Right.
I know that zoning questions, in my experience on the advisory board, are sometimes one of the more lengthy things that get talked about on the town floor. So it'd be great to have a lot of this pre-understood, well vetted, and just sail on through. That would be a dream that I have. We'll see. Any other last comments or input people would like to make? Yes? No?
No. That was an untired book.
Okay, so thank you. We're going to move on.
Before you do, could I just say one thing?
Oh, please, yes.
Pass along some information this morning at around noontime. A longtime member of the advisory board passed on, a fellow named Graham Sterling.
Oh,
Oh,
I'm
no.
sorry to hear that.
Yeah,
I didn't
so
know him.
just to let you know.
Graham Sterling. Arlie's father. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Arlie's father was in the advisory.
Yes.
He was a legacy.
He was on it.
Well, my condolences to his family. Okay. Thanks for the update, and thanks to everyone in the community who showed up. We're going to go on to talk about department schedules, so it might not be as interesting, but feel free to move on. Thank you. Free time, yes. Yeah.
I thought it was great.
How much work goes into stuff?
I would be happy to talk
Can you
about.
guys take your discussions outside if you're gonna have them, please? Thank you.
Thank you.
I would be happy to type up something for the B1 committee if anyone wants to get their concerns, I can call it.
I don't have to do it, if someone else would like to do it.
This is
that's
on top of
fine.
what we just did, or do you want these as well?
Right, well, I don't know that, she's gonna type up the minutes, but I don't know that if it would be in a concise enough form for me to then present to the committee.
Can you start with the minutes and see if that? Thank you.
If anyone has a specific question or concern that they want changed or addressed.
And it could be a concern we have about this event being presented to a larger group, not a concern we necessarily have, but if we want the town to, I guess,
Yes,
right,
it could be
on behalf of the
any,
town.
on behalf of the town, okay.
yes, it doesn't have to be your personal concern,
Yeah.
it can be just from
Your
your
constituents,
seeing,
if you
the
plan to say that.
constituents, you can say,
Right,
I'm
constituents.
seeing that this is going to be an issue. There are some things, for example, I'm supporting the zoning changes in the B1 area as a member of the advisory board, but as a citizen, I don't personally support them.
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm saying?
I do.
I am separating the two out. It's saying, okay, I know it's gonna happen, so I'm gonna get on board, but as an actual person who lives in this area,
Yes.
I would prefer not to see any apartment buildings.
And commercial space, Susan?
No, I don't mind the commercial, but again, I completely understand that no developer's going to do it.
Right.
So with that said, I'm holding my breath
At
and saying,
property, can I just, because
Yeah.
this really bothers me, at property values are what they are today.
Yes.
right.
Today's economic situation necessitates this but
That's what I'm saying, as a
In the future, it may be different.
citizen.
But in the future, it may be different, and it's not the reason, it's not that they'll only do it because it's more profitable to do it the other way,
Right.
right? So it's a chicken, and
What's the other way?
the other way is you don't need mixed use.
Just
You only need-
pure commercial.
You only need mixed use right now.
Right, because if our numbers of people in town is gonna go up by another 20% in the next 10 years, then commercial might show up just because of that, right, is one I.
Could be, but the truth is residential is so hot
Right.
that so the developers are not the property owners. There's a difference.
Yeah, well, not always, but
Not
yes.
always, but in this case there is.
Mhm.
And so right now they're loving that we're here talking about how we can
Exactly.
build more money for them,
Right.
more value by going this direction, but
It drives up the lot price. It
One of
absolutely
my
does.
concerns as a advisory board member and as a resident of the town is this, and I think someone else said it here tonight with I think it was Jonathan, he said, you know, with this whole, if we build it, they will come mindset. Do we really know that? Or are we going to end up with 60, 70, 80 empty apartment units in the middle of town? Because at some point, the housing bubble is going to burst, just like it has always historically, generation after generation. It's going to at some point. And when that happens, are we going to be stuck with a bunch of vacant apartments or half developed pieces of land? I mean, do we know for sure that once they get that
It's a question of risks.
that the
Yes, it is.
viability
It's
is
a question of
there?
risks. So understood that, and many things will need to be considered.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for offering to make the list.
Yeah.
Please send things directly to Susan that you
Yes.
have. I appreciate starting off with just the minutes so that you can call that and see. I think there are a lot of very strong points made. I think we've also repeated it ourselves several times, so. I'd be
I
surprised.
think I will definitely go based on the minutes in case anyone.
But the
doesn't
No,
have the time to
minutes
email.
are not
Right, so I
the
would-
minutes are summaries of our discussions,
understand.
so
Right,
there's
so I'm
no
saying-
questions there.
I would rather go
Yeah.
based on that in case someone doesn't have the time to email me or is
Okay.
busy with their other jobs and whatever. But if you really feel strongly that you would like to see those changes, your
Yes.
personal changes made for the B1,
Got it.
it'd be best to email me.
Okay,
the
thank you.
language that you want me to use, because
Thank you.
I'm typing it,
That's great.
it's not my opinion,
That's
it's
great.
yours.
So-
But just so we don't violate any open meeting laws, everyone's question should come to me.
And then you'll
So
send
there's
them all
no
to me.
dialogue back and forth
Okay.
between
Okay.
a group of you creating a quorum
Okay.
accidentally.
Okay.
Now, moving on to the next item, so zoning is done, finished, behind us. What's that?
Did we solve it?
Here, I think we have it in printout form, it's in here someplace, okay. Departments, they have information we would love to have, and discussions that we would love to have. How did the all Saturday thing go?
I think it went well. I think it was an important exercise for the board to.
I call it the thing, could you frame it for the audience, people know
So.
what we're talking about?
So the select board, asked to have, go through all department budgets. I mean, we have a fairly new board. We have
Yes.
one member with a year and a half in experience and two with, less than a year experience. So, we went through and had just about every department of the town side of the organization come in and make a presentation. The bigger departments, delivered PowerPoints, smaller departments handled, with handouts or speaking points. And I put it upon all of us to put together the budget book as just hopefully a way to start to help people feel more informed if they choose to read it about what departments do, how many people they have, what their budgets are, some history.
I believe we also had a one-pager, correct, in that book?
The
advisory committee. Advisory?
Yep.
Thank you for putting that together, Susan, by the way. So
Thank you.
I know it's that big, but still.
It's-
I read 100 pages.
I did too. I was there for 2.5 hours
Right.
of it.
So,
We were
I
there
mean,
about
hopefully it's something that we'll build on over time, but the
Okay.
goal was to start, you know, when I got here last year, I felt like people didn't, what I heard was, gee, I don't get to know what the budget is unless I come to these meetings,
Mhm.
maybe drop in a select board meeting, or actually get at the night of town meeting.
Mm.
Something, how can we start to bridge that gap and
Mhm.
give people a place they can go, where they can read it, they can come to a meeting, whatever, but they have a better opportunity for that, so.
Okay.
So the meeting was live and taped,
Yep.
and so my question to you is, who would you like to see and when would you like to see them? What do you feel like you need more of, or again, to help you deliberate?
Sorry, so just a point so what we heard is not an approved budget.
No.
It's just the what was going to the select board.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's so we don't know what's in there and what changes are.
Well, most of them were presented at 3%, which is a
Or
level service
level
plan, or
funded.
a zero,
Right, we were asked to do both, and so.
and what the differences would be.
Correct.
Understood, but the select board has not approved, so for us to have questions about, so for us to, whatever we're going to see, like right now, if it goes through, if the fire department goes through at 3%, that was presented, that's understood. But what I think is going to happen is the board's gonna say, well, we're gonna do these other tweaks to the budget.
So they're not gonna actually discuss the budget till their March 3rd meeting, because our meeting next week, one member's away. So, and by March 3rd, we'll have our health insurance number, we will have a really good idea of where the two school districts are. Actually, the Norfolk Schools budget meeting is on Wednesday, the 4th of March. And so at that point, I think then the board can say, to give direction to the finance director and okay, this is what we want you to put together as our proposal. Come back and tell us exactly where each dollar is in each budget that gets us to that. And then you could debate, I guess you can debate that. This is my first time through the process here, so.
I'm sorry, what was that what did you say? You want us to debate it and make recommendations to the selectmen?
No,
Oh, okay, all right.
not at all. The selectmen got two options.
Right.
They're not gonna meet again until March 3rd to discuss those, so, and by then, we should have a very good idea of what all the raw numbers are.
So,
You guys,
So,
yeah.
so here's my sense of it. So again, you said that they're gonna meet, March 3rd, you said?
Tuesday, March 3rd.
Tuesday, March 3rd. Now, what's gonna happen, I think, is on a department by department basis. Maybe the select board goes for the 3% level budget. Maybe they go for the level service, maybe they'll go for the 3% level service. Maybe they'll go for the 0% increase level budget, or something in between. And
Probably.
they may decide to, I don't know what the correct word is, but reduce in certain areas. I don't know if cut's the right word or not, but again, trying to, if they do that, that will get presented to us, and then we're gonna have questions about that. I don't know at that point how much time do we have to ask those questions. So what I would like to get to is a point where the select board has made their recommendations. Then when it comes to us, we can then have a discussion based upon our understanding of the meaning of what the select board is asking. But it's difficult because I don't, so is there time for us to then dive in after the select board goes?
Well, I think so, because town meeting's not until May 12th.
Because
So,
We'd have to have multiple departments on the same night.
I didn't know if you wanted to have anyone before March 3rd to be able to just ask questions.
my sense is
and
that should
understand.
make sense, but David, let's discuss that.
can we have an overview of revenues and capital needs and something like that? That's a basic discussion, it's in there, but an opportunity to ask questions?
Sure.
So we get an understanding of that before we started seeing individual
Sure,
budgets?
I mean, we're not gonna
Um,
consider any capital in this.
Well, there was a capital plan put together, but.
Right, but we're not, the operating budget right now, I don't foresee us being able to, unless we make some significant cuts, being able to
Well, that's
plan for any
important.
capital in the spring.
That's an important discussion to have
Yeah,
as
no,
part of
I
a
get it.
revenue discussion, I think.
My-
But, I'm sorry, and I was also gonna say, if the schools are done,
They're not.
are they gonna be done before the 3rd?
No, the 4th, right, so.
So, I think that, I think KP's gonna be done on the 2nd
Of March?
of March, and then we meet the select board meets on the third, and schools want to meet on the third, but they're gonna move to the fourth because
I thought the school board had to be done earlier than that, like this month. I guess I'm wrong.
I could check with Ingrid, but.
No, I mean wrong.
The way it's, correct me if I'm wrong, Arthur. but the
History
way
would be
it's-
helpful to me.
So I say, the way it's happened in the past, we've never had all of we have your counterpart would have come and submitted sort of an overall town budget, and then The Paul's larger. the two schools would have come and presented their budgets.
I think
But we
that-
never had, and sometimes.
Police and
sometimes
fire.
DPW.
Right, but we didn't have all of them. It
Okay.
was sort of bulked into the sort of town
Okay.
overview. So we never really had more than 5, 6 of them come, and sometimes we had them like fire, police, and DPW might all be on the same night.
Sure.
You know, and then each school got their own night.
Sure.
So to speak. So I would think that we would need at least 3 meetings prior to when warrants need to go out, to decide if we're supporting it.
Well, you could meet the 11th, 18th,
If you
and
wanted to
25th
speak
of
to
March. We've got three weeks after the 4th.
So we should plan on going ahead and bringing in people on those 3 meeting nights.
We're here to make sure they're here for you when you want them here.
Well,
So understood.
So,
If the 11th is an overview, right, you said you wanted an overview
I think
first, so
it
that would be
makes
the 11th,
sense.
once a bunch of overviews are ready to go, so the 11th would be anybody, but then maybe the 18th and 25th would be budget people, departments we wanted to talk to?
They could be, I want people to be prepared. I know we're talking about what's happened before. I just want people to be prepared. We're doing, some people think this is a good analogy, others don't, but this is an approximation of a zero-based budgeting exercise. So we could be talking about substantial changes where we may not be in alignment with the select board. We may, or we may not.
Well,
We
the
have to
select
figure
board
out.
may not approve it. I mean, they got the information, but
but if we talk to a department before the recommendation is made, we have to have the department back if it's a major change.
yes.
Right.
Say, what happens now that you've lost half your,
Yes,
Roll
so
call.
we should do it all after the March 3rd meeting.
And I'm just saying that in terms of bandwidth, that's a much bigger conversation than we've ever had in the past. Now, I don't know if that's gonna happen or it's not, I just want us to have enough time to make sure that we can adequately do our responsibility as the advisory board, understand the complete impact of the changes, if there are, that the select board is proposing, and then we need to understand that. We need to be able to make a recommendation and perhaps even a separate proposal if we think that that's appropriate. David, yes.
can we maybe work backwards from when we would absolutely have to have our recommendations finalized and written?
What would that be, Blake?
So we plan to sign the warrant on April 21st. So that, and it has to, by law, it has to be posted a week in advance. But certainly, we've usually done longer because you've got the moderators meeting, that's likely the 28th.
Candidates night.
Candidates night somewhere in there, I don't know the date, and so,
April 21st.
okay,
So
so.
that's what you said, right, April 21st?
That's what
For
she
the
said is
warrant.
the warrant. Is
Okay,
this
Sign
so
the
backing
warrant.
up.
Sign and
So to me, we have up until the week before to really have figured out whether there's, just select board and advisory are on the same wavelength, they're not, we,
Okay, what I don't understand and I need to come to grips with is, I hear what you're saying. In the event that the advisory board feels that it's necessary to bring multiple amendments or an entirely different budget, I'm just the hypothetical, how does that work? Can we even do that in 1 week after the 14th?
So, just a suggestion, I may not be one that everyone wants to do. I saw Mike at the Saturday,
Yeah.
I was.
Well,
But
we weren't
no
there,
one's
but it's
public
all-
thing.
on YouTube.
So maybe what we would have to do is do something like that on a smaller scale and bring they managed to do it, I think, almost each department, Blythe, right, in 40 minutes?
the large ones are 40 minutes, the
Okay.
small ones.
But, so anyone can watch that on YouTube at their leisure.
Yes.
What would be more interesting to me to see is after the meeting on the 3rd, where there is a recommendation, we have people who did not get the 3% level service budget approved to understand where the deviations are between level service and the proposed budget from the select board indicating where we think we were taking service level decreases.
Agreed.
So
Yes,
that's what you would be comfortable,
agreed.
everybody watching the budget presentation,
Yeah.
and then bringing in the groups who aren't going to be funded at 3%. And what
Yeah,
are,
but we
what's
always, we
being
always
taken
see the
away.
schools, we haven't seen the schools didn't
True.
present, so we
So-
still need both schools to come.
Right, but we'll still know after that date what the selectmen's intention is.
But even
select
I
board's
don't
intention
know
is.
exactly what that's gonna look like. I don't know whether they're gonna say to Todd and I, put together a 2.75 budget and give us that,
Right.
or they're gonna say, we wanna go department by department. If you follow the bylaw, they should give us an overall, and we figure out exactly where to put
That
the
was my
money in the
next question,
buckets.
Right, that was my next question to you was,
I'm
can they, my question to you is, can they come back when they vote? Can they say, okay, we're gonna fund police at 3%, fire at 2%, schools at 2%, and all the rest at 0? Or do they have to fund everybody equally? Everybody, if they say 2%,
No,
everybody
No,
has to
or
be
they, can they say
2%?
overall budget's 2.7, you guys figure?
What?
If you follow the way I read the bylaw, if you follow it purely, they're gonna give us an overall direction, and our job is to react to that and tell them exactly what that looks like in our best professional, police, fire, public works, school.
So for example, they don't get to say to you, I don't want you to buy the new truck for the DPW, but I do want you to do this. They don't get to do that. They give you the percentage and you have to make that decision.
Ideally, but the only caveat I would say is if they had a real concern about a level of service.
But that's a more of their opinion.
A-
I'm saying they
more
can't
of a
actually
policy
make it.
decision.
Yeah.
We
Finance
don't,
question, what's fungible after the budget's approved? So like, if something is a cost cap high and one's low, like printing's high or low, does that matter, or is it fungible within DPW, how they spend their money?
the way the
Taking
budget's
transfers.
passed is by salaries and expenses, so if you overspent gasoline, but you underspent, power tools, then yes, you can move that around. You can't move salaries around unless.
But that salary in the DPW, for instance, that's for each of their divisions too. It's cemetery salaries and
It has been.
solid waste salaries and stuff like that. So that
Yeah.
if they need
But we
an
don't
extra
need to
solid
do a
waste
line
guy.
by line review.
No, I
We
don't
should,
think we do.
we should review the
Because I
fungible
think
levels
it's
and
gonna
what they're
be a
planned.
overall percentage.
Right.
My only other question, because this has never come up
Yes,
before,
yes, all right,
since I've been on the advisory board. Hypothetically, if, let's say, in this world that we're living in now, the select board says, we're gonna fund at 0%, right?
Everything.
Everything.
So flat-
We're all okay with what you presented
budget.
would be your level budget, so we're gonna keep you all at
Hypothetically, no
zero,
one's saying it's gonna happen.
hypothetically.
Yes.
But then when that comes to the advisory board, as a whole, we vote and we say, we don't support that. So now we get up at town meeting and we say, this budget is not supported by the advisory board. The town votes. In the situation where the town does not approve that 0 budget, does it automatically fall back to the 3%?
We're supposed to submit an alternative.
You're
We're supposed to
We would
submit
have
an
to submit an
alternative.
So
We
we
have
would
to have a
say,
number
so
that
we would
propose.
say as the advisory board,
Yes.
this is all hypothetical, I'm not saying this is the
I
way the
propose an
advisory board.
amendment, Mr. Moderator.
We oppose an amendment saying, we don't support the 0 budget, but we do support a 2.7, we do
Okay,
support a
Susan,
3.
now, actually, hang on, David, Susan.
I just need to know how it works.
Something that makes this a little bit more complicated is, strictly speaking, we propose the budget.
Yes.
I think David,
Jay,
thank you, Jay.
Wow.
Yeah, we could go first.
Yes,
We could go first.
okay.
Well,
and then I would
Which
need
means
to
we-
present what the select board had proposed, and then you go.
Both get
Now,
voted
now,
on.
and again, I want us to have these procedures down. No one's looking to be
No, but we need to be
confrontational or
prepared.
whatever.
We
I'm
need
just
to
trying to
be
understand. Yeah, correct. So my biggest concern is just we always run out of time. I would rather have things in place in case we need them instead of being caught like the scenario that you're exactly talking about. Well, we vote something down, there's nothing that's an alternative, now we're stuck.
Right.
So I just don't want us to be flailing on town meeting night. That's why I wanted
That's
to
what
get-
I wanted to know.
But that's an excellent question. David, I cut you off. You had a question.
I was gonna say the one thing we have to be sure of is that the revenues were there. We can't deficit spend either, so we have to propose a budget that meets whatever revenue projections are agreed
Well, and
upon.
part of the conversation with the board earlier on was, did they wanna have a tax increase just up 2.5% or
Or,
something?
yeah, or we propose an override or something like that.
Right, because like we know right now, I can tell you today, that in the governor's budget for state aid, we're getting $220 less than we got this current year because
220,000.
220,
Oh.
3 digits, 2220.00, $220 less. State aid went up, but we got really, charter school tuitions was a major increase as a deficit against that, you know, because there were more kids going to.
220 per student.
$220.
$220 total.
The number
This
is.
is a fireman.
FY20,
Slightly lower.
FY21, $220 less overall in state aid than the
And-
current year.
Right, and you're saying it should have gone up 3%, and not only didn't go up 3%, it went down $200.
Very slightly.
But it's a revenue.
But
So, you know, we know some of those things. We also know in some accounts, there cannot be a level funded because our pension assessment for Norfolk County is up 6.8%. We have to pay that. You know,
So
debt
the-
is debt.
So the select board's meeting on the 3rd, we'll know a lot more after, we will obviously wanna meet on the 4th to then talk about this and understand. I don't think we're gonna wanna have department heads there that night, but we'll
Something else
wanna,
is happening on the 4th though that I thought we'd wanna wait for too, like the
School.
school stuff.
School.
So I think March 11th is the first
Exactly.
Wednesday we could meet.
wouldn't we wanna at least talk about the non-school, budget items that, or the select board waiting?
You're saying they're voting on the 3rd, you wanna meet on the 5th?
I don't know if they're gonna vote. I know they're gonna discuss. I don't know. I'm new at this.
Should we
With them.
have someone go from the advisory board be at the select board so that they can report back instantly, so that we can be a little bit more prepared and we
Well,
can
Blythe's
start
gonna know.
calling?
Blythe is gonna know.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I'm just saying.
If someone wants to go, they can, I think we're gonna know real time enough is what actually happens.
I feel like the 11th's the best day when the most stuff will be in so we can see
Okay.
the full picture.
Yes.
Okay, so that gives us the 11th, 18th, 25th, April 1st and 8th, and then after that, it starts getting close to things.
And the
getting
15th
done.
though, that's six Wednesdays.
Okay,
Yep.
Set them all.
so, yeah,
They're already posted.
wonderful, excellent work.
So we're
Susan, as
meeting,
always.
we're meeting the 11th
Through the 6th.
through April 15th.
Yes.
Now, the
Is
budget,
April 15th vacation week?
Yes.
No,
It
it's-
is.
No,
Yes.
The week before vacation week?
it's the
or
week before vacation week.
So
23rd.
vacation week
Sorry.
is the 20th?
I know school.
I'm
Patriots-
only
Patriots
asking
Day's the
because
20th.
I don't wanna miss the
Patriots Day's the
final,
20th.
huh?
Patriots Day is the 20th.
Okay, I'm gone
School
vacation week,
vacation.
thank you.
Okay.
I'm gone school vacation week, I
Okay.
just,
Understood.
we're
Um,
flying, I can't change it, so.
People have specific departmental assignments, we don't have the list here, where you're supposed to act as the lead and the
Yeah, part
liaison
of the
between.
list.
Right, so please pay special attention to your particular area, yes.
The list was done before we lost 3 committee members.
No, we
last year.
redid it last week, or last meeting.
Yeah,
Did you?
A
You
little
put
bit,
me
a
on.
little
We
bit.
didn't finalize it.
We didn't move you.
Oh, good, I'm still B1.
There's only new people.
We didn't finalize it though, did we?
Susan will
Sort of did.
circulate this afterwards.
Could someone let me know what,
It's
other
here.
You asked
than
to be
B1 if I have to do
Yeah, but I
anything
think we
else?
discussed like
Because
that
that's a
in
lot.
here, so.
So we'll circulate it, so I'm just saying, if your department is in the crosshairs, we need you to take special
Good,
attention to that, so
library,
please
great.
be.
Unfortunately,
It's in the
I
process.
believe I was schools last
So like
time,
cut the
and
weekends.
schools and B1 are on the same
Schools has
night.
been assigned.
Huh?
Jim
Schools-
Lehan took
Jim Lehan took schools.
Oh, okay, so what did you put for me then? Because
We actually thought you were gonna cover them together, so we didn't put you for that.
you put me on just on the B1?
We didn't, well, B1 isn't a budget thing, so
It's
we were
not, but
treating
I
it
can't,
separately.
I can't physically go to another meeting if it's on the same night as the B1
I understand
meeting,
that, but we
so.
didn't give you anything because we assumed you were gonna do schools.
No, he just
'Cause you
said
were
Jim
doing-
Lehan to
no,
schools.
We've always had 2 people in schools, so you were gonna do
Okay,
it together.
alright, I'll send Jim an email and make sure that he's gonna be able to go to that meeting, cause
Thank
it's on
you.
the same night as the.
Yeah, I think-
just
yeah,
put it
no, no,
down
yeah,
there. It's
I-
on the same night
Thank
as
you
the
if you
It
would
B1.
wasn't a matter of
Thank you.
the B1. It was
Okay,
a matter
so-
of assuming you were already.
Thank you, Blythe, for the orientation, I think we all understand.
Still learning myself.
Yeah, I think we all understand that the 11th is gonna be an exciting meeting, so please eat your Wheaties that morning.
So I just
Should
wanna
we-
make sure that I know which departments you want that night, so I can make sure they can make
I
it.
don't
I don't
think
want
anyone's
anybody
done.
that night.
I think we
Just
want
you.
you and Todd.
Right,
probably,
yeah.
You and Todd, and then
Yeah.
after that, we'll start the,
Alright, but I'll
The
give them a
downhill
heads
skiing.
up that we will probably, they should keep Wednesdays available.
that
I
would
would
be
say
extremely helpful.
specifically if
Thank
there's
you.
someone that's getting a bigger cut.
Sorry?
I would say specifically if they end up getting a more.
Which you'll
Or they're
know
feeling
before
like
we
they're gonna be part
Right.
of the larger crunch, right? I
Right.
mean, people are gonna be tough, people are gonna know that.
Right.
And we're gonna try to understand alternatives, just how trade-offs and such, so,
Jeff?
thank you.
3% to the Board of Health or 3% to CPC doesn't equate to the same as the schools losing 3%.
The schools are the big
So-
kahuna, obviously.
so-
Right, and for, in
So
the town
taking
side,
3%.
it's fire and
Yeah.
fire and EMS.
Right. No, I'm just saying,
Oh, yeah.
in general, I would think they were
Yeah.
probably always gonna be the bigger ones,
Fire department.
so.
Your police?
I'm DPW. You
Arthur's
volunteered.
on fire.
Yes, you volunteered for the Martha.
Yes.
I have it in writing.
I really wished I had been here.
Thank you.
Last week. I don't know what's going on.
Whoever had
You can get
library, did you have library?
No, we
Sat
have.
on your hands.
Okay.
No, I have.
Well, then you should take schools. Nobody wants
I'll,
school.
I'll work with Susan to find the list and we'll circulate it. Okay,
Thank
now,
you.
thank you for the
Seen a
scheduling.
couple.
It's time for minutes, and boy, do we have another load.
We
I'll
do.
let you guys get to that.
So before Dave reads his motion, I just wanna let everybody know that I had mentioned, we had tried to approve
Thank
these
you,
minutes
Mike.
at the last meeting, but we didn't have a quorum to do so, cause Jim had to recuse himself. These are, in 2015 and 2017, while I dealt with my son's illness, I just wanted to go back through, make sure everything was done the way it was, because my chairs had offered to take the minutes for me. I did all the behind the scenes work, and what I found out was some of them had maybe been approved, but not sent down to the town clerk's office. So just to make sure that we're covering ourselves in all of the open meeting law and minutes rules, I checked with the town clerk, you do not have to be the board that was
Was
in the
there.
meeting for these minutes to be approved. You
Okay.
can be on this board now, and we can approve, as you'll see, many different sets of minutes, so
Thank you.
we'll be
Motion.
all caught up when I leave in May.
Very quickly, I wanna also add, to give you some sense, I did read all the minutes.
Oh, wow.
I skimmed the ones that happened 2 to 3 or 4 years ago, but the ones that were done in 16 and 17 were written fully, they were fully formed minutes.
Wow.
Meaning, someone did them as minutes, so I think there's some comfort level that they may have been voted, but they were just never sent.
Right, there are many,
We're
some of them
re-voting.
actually, absolutely were voted, but I'm just making sure.
Do I hear a
Did I
motion?
hear you say you're leaving?
I'm not gonna support the advisory board after this town meeting.
I had a quick.
And who's going to take that role
We're
over?
gonna-
Find some.
Excellent questions to be discussed after we have
Yes.
much unfinished
Okay, so
business. Mr.
I
Lutz,
move to approve the following, am I doing this all as one giant motion?
Go for it.
You are.
I move to approve the following meeting minutes with edits, which are my edits. Some of the meetings are from prior advisory board members. The meetings that are voted by us with less than a majority of the members here will have an asterisk by them to note, so note. For 2020, we're voting the meeting minutes for January 8th, 2020. 2019, November 19th, November 4th, October 30th, October 23rd, October 16th, October 8th, August 20th, June 26th, April 17th, April 10th, April 13th, March 30th, March 8th. Oh wait, this is out of order.
It doesn't have to be. in
That's
order.
okay, just the
No,
dates.
I'm confusing. March 13th, March 16th, March 20th, March 27th. So actually, it's not March 8th, it's April 8th. That's a mistake.
Okay.
In 2018, March 28th, April 4th, April 18th, April 25th, June 25th, October 24th, November 17th. In 2017, October 4th, October 11th. I guess the other ones are wrote. 2016, March 2nd, March 16th, March 23rd, May 10th, June 29th, October 12th, and November 27th in 2016. That is the list. as
Do I have a
it states.
second?
Second.
Okay, any questions on the motion? There being no questions, all in favor of accepting the minutes as edited and ably read by, through heroic efforts by Mr. Lutz, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Okay, the ayes have it, unanimously passed, outstanding. This has been a outstanding meeting, which I'm eager to bring to a close. Are there anything that can't wait until next meeting?
Just because I wasn't here last month, I just wanna double check. Are we not meeting again until March 11th?
Correct.
That is correct.
And then after that, we're meeting every week?
Nonstop, at least
Correct.
until
Till the
through the
15th.
11th.
And, well, and then we'll, but then we'll have to meet again before town meeting.
Right,
Yes.
right before, like we usually do.
Okay,
Okay,
but we're gonna vote on the warrant by April 15th, yes, great.
that is the plan.
Okay.
A motion to end the meeting?
All right, make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Okay, any questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
That was,
No opposed. Thanks,
that was,
everyone.